Okay, good morning. It's 10 o'clock on the 7th of August. Welcome to the Scrutiny for Communities meeting. I hope everybody can hear me. Welcome to Clive Heapy, the Interim Chief Finance Officer and Section 151 Officer, and Neil Adams, the co-opted member from the Harbour Management Authority, who are today here to assist with questions and generally observe. Before we go too much further, can everybody hear in the room and online?
Yes, we can hear online.
Thank you. The agenda pack with papers is available via mod.gov or directly from the council website from the link which has been sent out to members and is available to the general public. When I invite someone to speak, could you please clearly state who you are for the benefit of anybody listening online so they can identify you at a later date if they need to follow it up. Can I also warmly welcome any members of the public and media and will be available, I think, on YouTube shortly afterwards. Finally, as agendas are now viewed electronically, could I kindly request that members and officers refer to the page numbers from the published agenda pack to assist all present in finding the appropriate information. Right, so we move on to item 1, which is apologies. Jamie, do we have any apologies for today or subs, please?
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, committee. We have received apologies from Councillor Aulia, for whom Councillor Filmer is substituting. We've also received apologies from Councillor Ham, for whom Councillor Ferguson is substituting. Councillor Kendall has given his apologies. He is online as well, but Councillor Hobhouse is substituting him in the room. We have received apologies from Councillor Price-Sankey, for whom we were anticipating Councillor Lovell to substitute, not in the room currently, Chair, and I understand Councillor Hart is running 5 to 10 minutes late.
Okay, thank you very much. Now the second item are the minutes of the previous meeting, which have been circulated. Is everybody happy that they're an accurate record of the proceedings and happy that I sign them off as such? Welcome, Martin. Thank you, Simon. Any seconders? Thank you, Marcus. All those in favour, please. Unanimous. Thank you. All right. We have a reasonably full agenda today. Are there any declarations of interest from members in relation to items on the agenda? Marcus Cravis, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'm a member of the Harbour Advisory Committee. That's got the name, if I've got the right name. But also, I'm reading the report, and I just noticed tucked away on page 44 is a reference to West Somerset Lagoon. In my register of interests, you might find that I'm a director of a now dormant company. I just want to clarify for the record that this is I'm not associated with this project in any way, and just for avoidance of any doubt. Although I let the website name go, what I didn't do was change. I still happen, by some quirk, to be in control of the Facebook page, which is called West Somerset Lagoon, which obviously no one seems to have noticed. It's very useful though, because it's got a lot of followers, so I do share a few things to it, but just for avoidance of doubt, I have no interest in that project as is.
Thank you very much. Are there any other declarations of interest? No? Okay, thank you very much. We now have public question time. There are 2 public questions. One speaker is in the room, Liz Brown, and Mr. Rayner's question will be read by Jamie Jackson in a moment. So, Liz, when you're ready, please press the button, and if you can move a little bit closer so you can be better heard. Thank you.
Liz Brown, Parish Councillor for Bridgewater Without. As a Parish Councillor for Bridgewater Without, I am very concerned that the uplift of over 300 units proposed for the East Bridgewater allocation will do little to help the thousands of residents on Home Finder Somerset. The latest and largest of the 3 major schemes under consideration of 750 houses is not viable at 0% affordable housing, according to the developer's viability statement. This violates policy D6, affordable housing, which requires 30% social housing on greenfield sites. Can you explain to me how can these major developments be granted at anything less than policy stipulation for affordable housing targets? And how can the uplift in housing numbers be justified at anything less than 30% provision? With an increasing mental health and obesity crisis, it is universally acknowledged that exercise and access to green space can improve health outcomes. There is a shortfall in accessible green space provided with the Bauer scheme of approximately 2 hectares, which does not address the expected population increase of 1,725 in an area of Bridgwater already severely lacking in green space. This contravenes Natural England's accessible natural green space standard national guidance, which recommends 3 hectares per 1,000 residents, and Council Policy D34, outdoor public recreational space and new residential areas, and D30, green infrastructure requirements in new developments. In a community report conducted last year in conjunction with the Community Council for Somerset, 2 out of 3 respondents thought that there is not enough natural green space in our parish, with around half expressing a need for a new community centre. This scheme also fails to deliver this essential facility, which was understood to be provided. This may limit opportunities, for example, youth activities, which could contribute to increased antisocial behaviour long term. Instead, there is an aspiration that the school will also serve as a community facility by arrangement. However, there are no guarantees that this will work, since it is unclear who will oversee the school and is therefore against policy B3, placemaking policies and community facilities. Why is the council consistently allowing developers to maximise their profits by non-delivery of essential infrastructure as laid out in policies referred to in the current adopted local plan? Are you interested in building healthy and cohesive communities for the future, or merely satisfying numbers and profits? And lastly, why is permission granted to developers who renege or negotiate to heavily reduce contributions requested for critical services such as education and healthcare, as in policy B14 education and D28 health and social care? Many thanks.
Thank you. Exactly to time. As you're aware, this is a community scrutiny meeting rather than a planning committee, and we're only taking the planning item as an exception in this particular case. I'll therefore ask our director, Chris Hall, to respond to your question. Thank you.
Yeah, good morning. Thank you. Good morning, members. Thank you for your question. I'm afraid it's come to the wrong committee. So this committee has no portfolio oversight of planning matters. I think it's been accepted and therefore we have to hear it today, but it needs ideally to be redirected to the Climate and Place Scrutiny Committee, where they do have portfolio oversight. I would also just say that I think there's a live planning application in the mix. So some of your statements are around policy and some of those relate specifically to a live planning application. And were we taking this question and providing a formal response, I would be having to advise members that if they sit on the planning committee, they need to think seriously about whether they can be part of a debate on this public question or even hear the response, because it could prejudice them in what should be an otherwise independent decision made by the planning committee itself. So I will thank you for your question. I would respectfully request it's redirected to Climate and Place Scrutiny for consideration.
No, that's all right. That's fine. And we're always welcome interactions from the public. And but as Chris says, I think your questions will be better directed, certainly from the policy level, to Climate and Place. And clearly, if there's a live planning application in there as well, then that needs to be directed to the committee that looks at that in due course. But thank you very much for coming. And not from this committee, I'm afraid. No. We have a second question from Mr. Rayner, which I think Jamie is going to read out.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Rayner's question is, may I request that you sustain and enhance planning constraints that protect our natural environment and its ecosystems for us and our future generations to inherit? Are we aware of the importance of green spaces and the long-term value of our farmland for our food production, security and general well-being? Are we overdeveloping our green land and overwhelming our facilities disproportionately? Is the building lobby now too powerful while exploiting the massive non-pro rata expansion of our rural settlements as opposed to the major towns and cities? Are the housing number targets set by the Treasury with the primary objective of creating economic growth for short-term gain while destroying ecological balance and food production land that is vital for the future quality of our island inhabitants?
Okay, thank you. Again, I will, again, it's not necessarily a question that's within the purview of this committee, but Chris will reply as well.
Yeah, a similar vein there, that I think it's at the wrong committee. However, this one doesn't relate to a live planning application, and I think we can work with the planning team to provide a written response. So obviously the member of the public is within their right to redirect the question if they wish, but I think an answer can be provided to this one in writing via the planning team.
Jamie, can you advise me when the next Climate and Place Scrutiny Committee is, please?
The next meeting, Chair, is the 4th of September.
And the deadline for questions would be for that committee?
Be about the 31st of August.
So if you wish to go to the next committee, the 31st of August is your deadline. But you can put your question in now and ask it to be sent to it. Okay. Right, thank you very much. That's public question time. We'll move swiftly on to our work programme, which if you look at agenda item 5, is looking a little bit light. So I'm going to ask members if there are any particular issues that they particularly feel this committee should be looking at over the next 4 or 5 months. And then I'll come back. So I had a conversation with Chris about a couple of things 2 or 3 months ago, which would, so members, yes, Susanna.
Sorry, I think I have mentioned it before, but whether we could have some kind of in-depth report on the situation around the provision of some kind of traveller site within the county and looking at people who are part of the non-bricks and mortar community as they're known in Glastonbury and what we can do around that issue. I think I have asked twice before at least for this. Thank you.
The traveller community is sort of specific traveller sites, but I think you're also referring to sort of van dwellers in and around the Glastonbury area and Bristol, I think, has just been taking action against some area around the old stadium site, I believe.
Yes, I just think it's time we address that whole issue and look at what our kind of solutions are going to be. It's been a long time coming. Thank you.
Oh, Kathy, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just given the sort of financial challenges that this council faces, is there opportunity within here to look at as a whole in terms of getting the timing right for scrutinising the budget set and everything like that? I noticed there's the annual report at the end of the year. Is that a chance when we will look through our responsibilities against the budget challenges? It just feels like I'm just worried that we'll miss an opportunity to properly scrutinise as the budget setting programme gets underway.
Okay, there are 2 things there. I think the annual report will tend to be a look back on how we've gone, and of course, as you know, regular reports no longer come to scrutiny committees; they go straight to corporate and resources, which I think. And whilst there is an invitation for everybody to go to those meetings, I think I do prefer. Thanks, Liz. I would prefer to see it for our area of work. Now, at Corporate and Resources last week, I asked 1 or 2 questions in relation to the transformation, particularly about work planning and budget planning going forward, because I'm not sure I quite understand how it is done. And I would like to understand that from a community's perspective. And I'm sure our director will be able to give us a briefing on that. Now, whether that is appropriate for an item in an agendaed meeting, or whether it's a briefing for us as a group, as councillors, I don't know. I will consult with Chris. Chris, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I think so. There's so many of these things that are interconnected across the council in terms of budget setting and the transformation programme. I think it's not unreasonable for Scrutiny to want to understand, as part of budget setting, what the proposals might look like for changes within the community's portfolio. So I definitely think there's something that we can put in the forward plan. Exactly the timing of that we need to work through, but I do think there's an opportunity there, absolutely.
Okay. Do you think it's an agenda item or should we have a briefing? I prefer an agenda item and have it in public, really.
More than happy with an agenda item.
Okay. Councillor Lation.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know whether Clive Heafy is able to come in at this point. We have been discussing already how we cover all of the scrutinies at present, because we are really up against it now. We're setting the budget for 26-27, and the transformation plans come into it, of course. But if anybody wished to look, I'm trying to remember which meeting it was when there were 3 appendices. So one for the business as usual, one for change, and one for transformation. And that they were really excellent appendices, in my view, for understanding what lay ahead of us. But I see Mr. Heafy's online, and it would be much better, I'm sure, for you to put the question direct to him.
Mr. Heapy, have you a view on the proposal?
Through you, Chair. I'm working through at the moment the proposals for the timetable, which will include extensive scrutiny discussion, more than one opportunity to look at proposals and options, leading to a consultation going out in early December with the public and businesses to meet our statutory responsibilities, and leading then obviously to the approval of the budget in February, March next year. So if you can bear with, I've obviously only just been with the authority for 4 weeks, so if you can bear with me for a few more days, I'll have that paper ready, and I'm working hard with my team to make sure there's full engagement across the council.
Okay, thank you very much for that. I think yes, I mean, as Councillor Lation says, we're in a very difficult situation, and finance staff particularly under a lot of pressure. My observation has been, though, over the last 2 or 3 years, it's been the budget, which is the responsibility of this committee, is the one that's taken quite a lot of hits. And so therefore, I think we need to understand going forward how that's going to work out. But also, of course, the changes of directorate, because communities has now been subsumed into climate and place. And how that's going to work in terms of scrutinising, we haven't quite sorted out yet. But I think we do need to make sure that there is not a situation where scrutiny fails or items fall between the cracks, as it were, that we are fully on top of this, because I believe that the work that this committee oversees is probably some of the most prominent work in the eyes of the public. It's the kind of things that get noticed. And so if there are going to be cuts or transformation, shall we say, then I think we need to be on top of that. Okay, thank you very much. So if we can put something together on that basis, that would be really helpful. Are there any other suggestions? Marcus?
It was more, thank you, Chair. It was more, I remember, I think I recall it was this scrutiny where we were going to get a report back from how the lettings had gone in the new development in Minehead, and whether there are any lessons to be learned from that. And I assume, is that what's coming on Monday, the 8th of December? Will that be included in the revenue account? Or is that going to, the report then, or will there be another separate report? And if so, when will that be? Because I think I probably mentioned that 3 meetings ago, which whether that's or 2 meetings, it's good 3 months ago. And it'd be nice to get it before the end of the.
This is the Seaward Way.
Yeah, it was have a report on how that, and also then this gets me onto, I suppose, another subject, and you just touched on it there with regarding what's in what directorate and what's in what scrutiny committee. Obviously housing is now under adults, isn't it? Or housing services under adults, but where does that actually lead housing provision? Is that in climate and place, or is it in communities? And if that's the case, then I do think we need to have a good report by someone about the current situation with the housing crisis and how, and whether that's this scrutiny committee that should be doing it or whether it should be adults. I personally think it's communities issue, but I could stand corrected. But I do think we already know we've got a housing crisis. You only have to look about the lack of temporary housing, etc., etc. And I do think we could do with a report of some form coming to a scrutiny committee
Okay,
to see
Chris,
what we're going to do about it. Thank you.
Chris, can you advise us where on this and where it's likely to be or where it ought to be headed?
Yeah, by all means. I think there's a few things missing from the work programme. So we have talked previously about bringing that report here. Now, technically, the general fund housing responsibilities sit under adults, but I do believe there's a close enough link to the way that we manage our housing stock that it would be a realistic and reasonable request of this committee. So I do think there's a few things, if I may. One of those is around the lettings and an examination of Rainbow Way, Seaward Way, as it used to be known, in terms of that lettings policy. I think the other, which may be referenced here under HRA, is we would normally bring you something around the HRA business plan in anticipation of it going through for approval. So I think the HRA on the item listed is probably the business plan and budget prep work. We also talked about bringing something around the development programme. So this scrutiny committee is responsible for the oversight of our housing development programme. So we would bring a separate item on that to give you an update as to where we are with our growth, acquisitions and regeneration schemes. So I think those could be added. Absolutely right. There was a request for traveller prioritisation, traveller and non-bricks and mortar accommodation. Sarah Dowden and I are having a separate conversation because we're getting a lot of interest now at the moment around enforcement of unauthorised encampments, what that means for transition sites and so forth. So we're going to work up, our intention was to work up a member briefing because I think all councillors have got, have an interest in this now. I'm happy to work with you, Chair, in terms of whether that is a member briefing or an item for this committee, but I think that there's a wider audience of interest, but it's not lost, it's just not on the work plan list. And the Glastonbury Festival wash-up report is missing from the list, and we always bring an annual wash-up report as well. So we'll get all of those things added in at your approval.
Okay, thank you, Chris. I think we talked about the nature of the changes of this committee. Do we need to have an explainer on that? And how the changes of directorates are affecting relative responsibilities?
Yes, you're right, we did. So yeah, by all means, I can try and plot out which items sit into your scrutiny purview and which would have moved. So for example, general fund housing and some of those other bits. But yeah, so I can do something on that.
Thank you. That would be very helpful. Are there any other items? Oh, Councillor Lation.
Chair, could I ask under your housing item that you might want to look at the government changes to social housing, the additional money that's been put in and the very significant changes to right to buy, because they're going to be really important for the HRA, as is overall scrutiny of the HRA, of course.
Yeah, Chris, please.
Yeah, again, I think it's one of those where the organisation has a level of responsibility that other members might have an interest in. So at the moment, I was making an assumption, happy to change that, but that we would do some form of member briefing. So significant regulatory change that's come into place following AWAB's law. So we need to prepare for that as a social landlord provider with 2 landlord functions. And the mechanisms that the regulator are applying under AWAB's law for damp and mould are likely to be rolled out for all other maintenance and repairs. That will be a massive shift in the way that we control those maintenance and repair responsibilities. So I think there's a more corporate interest in some of those changes. But again, I'm in your hands as to whether we do that via scrutiny or an all-member briefing.
Well, I remember when I was sitting on audit some time ago that one of the reports that came through was about damp and mould, and I think our dare I say this, I think our performance was not quite as good as maybe it ought to be, and I think I did ask that it go on as a key performance indicator, and I'm assuming this is going to come into the annual report. Is it for housing? Is that where it would be?
So all of those go into the normal corporate KPI reporting that goes to Corporate and Resources Committee. So all KPIs across all services end up in that report, goes to Corporate and Resources Committee for oversight, and then executive and onwards to full council. So those KPIs are there and they exist and you can see them now. If you wanted us to do something specific, we of course could, but they exist at the moment and we can direct you to those.
Okay, well, I think I'd like a discussion offline about that if I can. because it's obviously quite an important thing. And again, it's one of it's something that does get a lot of public attention, and I need to make sure that we're on top of it, because it's not only is it a very serious issue, attracts a lot of attention, but it's also quite a difficult thing to sort out and cure. So so yeah, if we can have a chat about that at our next agenda setting or something, please. Okay, are there any other items that you would like to bring forward? Okay, well, thank you all very much for your input. Right, we'll move on to item 6, which is the harbour strategy. And Sarah Dowden, I think, is going to present this. And welcome to Neil Adams, who will provide supporting comment.
Yeah, thank you for that. Good morning, everyone. Yeah, Sarah Dowden, Service Director for Regulatory and Operational Services. I'm here today to present to talk about the strategy for Somerset Ports and Harbours. As Gwil's just introduced, I've got Neil next to me, who's one of our co-op members, and is here for any kind of more detailed and hopefully technical information that you, any questions you may ask. So I shall complete the report. I've got the absence of Dave Coles or Jessica Tyson, the Harbour Master, today, so you might need to bear with me a little bit. So you'll have seen the harbour strategy that's been developed and shared and circulated with you all. This is about really setting the tone and direction for the harbours and the ports for the next 10 years. So it's something that we've started to create since we've all come together as one authority. Obviously, the ports had different, were sat in different district areas previously. So the strategy covers the next 10 years. It's been developed by the Harbour Management Advisory Committee, covers Minehead, Watchet and the Port of Bridgwater. And it's just about that sustainable development, direction and governance for the next 10 years. So it's really important that we have the right finance in place for the harbours and the ports, so that they're not a massive drain on the authority, and that actually we're looking to the future, because at the moment there's some work that the ports do, particularly around EDF and the development of Hinkley Point C, that won't be there in the longer term future. So we need to be starting to plan for that going forward. We also need to make sure that we are abiding by all the port safety codes that we have to as an authority as well. So this picks up that element. So the main strategic goals are the safe and high quality infrastructure. So that's that legally compliant piece that I mentioned just now, that we have the stakeholder and community engagement that really is key going forwards. And over the last kind of 12 to 18 months, we've been trying to work on that to make sure that we are understanding the needs of the community and taking their thoughts on board, talking about and thinking about the tourism and commerce in those ports and harbour areas, what we can do to further develop it, thinking about the financial stability and sustainability. So as I said, for now and also in the future, so that we are spending money on the right things we need to in the port to try and future-proof it, celebrating that national and cultural heritage that we have in those areas, and thinking about the environmental protection and climate actions that we have. So they're the main strategic goals that are talked about through that strategy. The committee picks up on some infrastructure projects that we need to look at in terms of improvements to some of our assets, the environmental management, how we go about dredging, waste reduction in those areas, how we're going to market it, what we're going to do around digital transformation. And some of that will be picked up through our wider council transformation that we're doing, and also that economic development piece. So at the moment, we have a very small officer staff that work in our ports and harbours, and they are really busy doing the job that they do. What this is trying to do is come in and actually support them in moving these ports and harbours on, or else there is a risk we will just carry on doing in those ports and harbours, and there won't be any development, or there won't be a development thought for the future. So that's what the committee has come in and put in place. So it's been really, really helpful for that. So financial and risk implications. Well, at the moment, you'll have read it. The strategy is pretty high level. There's no financial implications. I'm not coming here today saying by supporting this document, you're going to spend thousands in the ports. This is any activity within that strategy will go through the normal council processes, and we will get the finance signed off as and when we need it. What we're coming today is to say, actually, this is this is a change for us as a council, as a new council as well, to say we've got a strategy in place for our ports and harbours now. We're kind of putting it on the map and making, well, asking for that buy-in really, to say in the future we may well come back to you and say this is the direction and changes we want to make in those areas. The risks are, as I've already touched on, the limited staff in those areas and the limited financial resources we have, but it's the staff that are key. It is a very, very small staffing group down there, and they are currently really busy doing the technical roles of being a harbour master and supporting the harbour master in their role. So to try and move this as far as we've got, it is a bit of an achievement really. And the last slide on here is that some recommendations and next step. This, after today, I'm hoping that it'll be recommended to go to executive for approval, and then the implementation of the items within it will be picked up based on resources we've got at the time, and as I say, all will come through a governance process at Somerset Council. The strategy is going to be renewed annually via the Harbour Masters Committee, and I think that that's probably all there is to it. It's already been through, obviously the Harbour Committee wrote it, developed it, it went to the committee a couple of weeks ago or so, and actually now we're bringing it here. So from our point of view, that's it. If you've got any questions, myself or Neil will try and answer them.
Okay, thank you very much. Members, do you have any questions? Councillor Hobhouse.
Sorry to be difficult, Mr. Chairman. There is no introduction paperwork. There is no on the agenda. There is no telling us who is the portfolio holder or the senior officer, or any recommendations covering this particular report. I fully understand if you accepted it without it, but I think we should have it here for the committee members.
Well, yes, I have just been looking for the covering paper and I can't find it, so I don't know whether it's on. I'm looking on mod.gov.
This was requested as a presentation and verbal update rather than as a report, so that's why there is no report.
I mean, I take your point that it would have been useful to have a little bit more context to it. So thank you for that.
If I may say, the other two reports are exactly the same. And I'm sorry, but having sat at most scrutiny committees now, I find it very difficult without having a nominated portfolio holder and nominated senior officers at the top of any report or presentation.
Thank you, Henry. Marcus?
Thank you, Chair. As I say, I do sit on the advisory committee, but I would say that I've missed a couple of meetings and probably not had very much input that maybe I should have done. But what I would like to say is this is an excellent report. I think it shows something I often say about the national park is the nice thing about the national park is it has state appointees on them. They're sometimes chosen for specific skills rather than their ability to win an election. With regard to that, I think this is shows the benefit of those cooperative members. I think maybe if you can explain more the finance. I mean, we know how under pressure all areas of the council are with regarding staffing. My concern when we talk about the financial side and staffing of this is that people's lives could be at stake. So I wonder if you could just highlight more about the financial side that we've got going on at Bridgewater with HBC, etc., and how in the long run that might be affected, and also just the risk we've got, because we talked about somewhere in here the coastal change and the risk of climate change and sea level rise and how we'd adapt that, but also as indeed the officer officer knows that it only needs a hole in a seawall and suddenly you've got £1.5 million you're looking for, and it wasn't a particularly big hole if my memory serves me right. How this council budget, not budget, but even has a sinking fund for that, but then you wouldn't want that sinking fund to come from the harbours side of things because actually it hasn't really got the capability to put that sort of amount of money in. Am I making myself, I don't want to use the word clear, does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I can pick up on the finance very high level to come back as an answer for that. And I can, in terms of the the sea level rise is probably not my area. I can get an answer for you, but that would be sit with probably another team within the council. Or Chris could pick up on the asset management side of it, so that's fine. In terms of the finance, so the port is a statutory service for the authority. So we have to have a harbour master in post, which is an individual, and they need to make sure they are carrying out the safety checks in the port and harbours, and we do that. And historically, that has always been carried out by all the predecessor authorities. So I'm comfortable from that point of view. That the port has an ability to generate income for us as an authority, and it's quite challenging to do that because most developments still want to bring deliveries through our road network, and we are trying to encourage that actually some of those deliveries come through the port, and certainly around those Bridgewater junctions there is a real benefit to businesses to doing that. So that's a piece of work we're trying to do, is to understand how we could develop the port in that area. While we're doing that, just down the road is Hinkley Point C, and at the moment they are bringing in, because that was a condition that they needed to do, a lot of items for the power station through the port. So at the moment they are paying us for that. So over the next up to the next 3 to 4 years, depending on the schedule of Hinkley Point, which we have no control over, obviously, we are bringing in and out cargo to Hinkley Point C. It's generating, certainly for the harbour or the port, a significant amount of income that we haven't received historically in that area. What we've got to do at the moment is make sure that that income is used within that port and harbour area to make sure we are controlling our assets and making sure they're where they need to be. So when that income drops off, which I am acutely aware of will happen at some point in time, we have a sustainable port and harbour that we can use and develop as we need to. So we've got kind of a period of time now where we've got the income coming in. It's probably not all going back into the ports and harbours, but we need to make sure that where we need to maintain our assets, that we are doing that while we have that income, because there is a future here that's going to look different to how it is now. So I think that's probably all I can say. I'm happy to bring something back in terms of the actual detail of pounds and pence, but that's essentially where we are with the harbour at the moment. It's the figures and the finance will look very good because of that income, but we have to really be really clear that going forward we won't have that amount.
Thanks. I mean, I've got some questions at the end, but I was going to pick up on that. Marcus, did you want to follow that up?
Thank you. I just wanted to, I mean, I think that's as good as answers probably, as good answers probably you could have given. I think, I think which will publicly show concern that it's not used as a short-term cash cow, and then suddenly 10 years down the line, oh, we haven't got any money for harbours. I think when you look at this, I mean, it is actually an excellent strategy. I mean, even the detail. I love the fact you described Minehead as charming, because indeed it is charming. You need to persuade a few more people you maybe need to persuade a few more people who live there that how charming it is, particularly the town council. With regard to and also I think you picked up on the tourism aspect and actually the TV and film aspect. And my latest ITV drama is something called, I think it's Karen Pirie it's called. Well, every opening shot is a picture of this harbour in some strange Scottish town that I've never heard of. But that's what they focused on. And I do believe there's a big opportunity of that West Somerset coast. It's no good being a secret that we all love. It should be a secret that other people know about as well. And it's a secret that a lot of us take for granted on that coastline. So there are opportunities in this report that I think could be built on, and I'd just like to publicly thank the advisory committee and the co-opted members, Neil being one of them, of the hard work and effort they put into putting in this strategy, and thank you very much.
Yeah, I was just going to make the general observation that any income presumably is going straight into the general fund and is not ring fenced for the harbour, and yet if something goes wrong in the harbour, you're talking about significant amounts of money, as Chris will no doubt recall with fondness. What was it, Christmas 21, something like that? So I think my main concern is the long-term sustainability of an asset. If something goes wrong, is going to cost a huge amount of money against its potential income stream, even in the good times. And I mean, I'm perfectly happy that we run harbours and that, you know, it's a facility. But given the financial situation we're in, we almost have to understand that they will be at a loss at some point, if not permanently. Chris, did you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just wanted to draw a bit of a distinction between the harbour operations and then the infrastructure, some of which is effectively a sea defence system. So around the entire country, the Environment Agency assess and designate whether areas of land should be hold the line, no active intervention, managed retreat, etc. And the range of the assets that sit along that are owned by the council. And there are a whole range of other coastal sea defence and fluvial assets that are owned by others. So we have thousands of these. So the responsibility for that part of the service and function doesn't sit directly with the harbours. It sits within James Duval's service area for climate and natural resilience, I think it is. And he is already undertaking, and has been for a while, with the support of WSP, a review of all of the assets that the council owns to understand what do we have, what is their significance in terms of coastal defence, and therefore what is the long-term plan with them. You're right, when something goes wrong, it is drastic and costly, and as a council we don't hold individual sinking funds for individual assets usually, so there are some exceptions, and therefore we would have to call upon general reserves or another means in the event of a catastrophic failure, as we did with a previous authority. So we recognise the risk. There's a piece of work underway to understand the level of risk now we are one larger authority. In terms of the accounting for harbours, so yes, they are all collected, but we are required to publish the harbour accounts separately on an annual basis, so you can actually see the harbour accounting process. And as Sarah's already pointed out, we're in a good place financially at the moment because of that increased demand from EDF, but that will fall away, and that's what this strategy is focused on preparing us for.
Thank you, Chris. Simon, you have a question? Oh, no, sorry. Oh, it's Kathy, I beg your pardon, sorry.
Thank you. My question is around Bridgewater, and I'm pleased to see on page 41 there's mention of regeneration. So it is a question about the infrastructure. It's just that when I've been in meetings about the docks, it's from where I sit, it seems like there are two strands happening possibly at the same time, the harbour strand and the regeneration, the project side of things. So really it's a plea, just because you're here today, is to seek reassurance that those you two are meshing correctly, because there are some huge decisions that will be coming up in the next 18 months or so. And it just feels like in the meetings I go to, which are the project meetings, that members of your team should be in the room at the same time. I know they've been included in other meetings, stakeholder meetings, but it does seem fundamentally important for the future governance and security of the infrastructure. So it's really a plea for you to be at the project meetings that I'm sitting at, please.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for that. I think it's really important that we do work. There's not just that particular project group, but there's others as well across the wider area that we need to make sure we're involved with. And certainly, as I say, the focus for many years has been on that just operational side of running these assets and facilities, and actually we need to stretch out and make sure that there's no duplication. So yeah, no, I'll pick that up. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tom Power, please.
Thank you. It's only a really quick question. I just wanted to know, when you were talking about the safety aspects, because obviously everything's constantly changing with health and safety, how often do the regulations for harbours, for safety regulations, change? Is it yearly, or is it just ongoing? With let's say, for example, if an issue arises, then it will change, or I just wanted to know if it just changes each year.
Yeah, so they work under the Port Marine Code, which can change. It won't be annually, but it can change regularly. And the overall responsibility, though, sits under the Health and Safety at Work Act 1974. So 1974 tells you how often that actually gets updated and changed. There are some newer regulations as part of that, which we follow, but it's the Port Marine Safety Code is what we need to follow down at the harbour and port. The ongoing requirements we have are things like, it's kind of outside of my lane now, but a replacement of a buoy or a safety marker, we would need to make sure we're doing that annually or having annual checks and inspections on that, which is linked back to regulations or the Port Marine Code. So the codes and the regulations and the acts might not change annually, but our requirements under them, we have to commit to maintenance on a 6 monthly or annual basis. That's the everyday stuff we need to do. So we can plan to that to a certain extent, because it's not like every year they go, well, now you've got to do this and now you've got to do that. But it's so it's not too bad in terms of keeping going with it. But yeah, there's not great change in terms of the health and safety requirements.
Okay, any other questions? I've got one. There's obviously a lot of talk or speculation about a lagoon. Do we have an understanding or know how the creation of a lagoon would impact on the operation of particularly Minehead and Watchet harbours? On the basis that if there's a lagoon, you can probably only get in and out just around high water. I don't know.
Fortunately, Neil to my left has just said he would be able to answer that for you.
Okay, Neil Adams. The Harbour Management Committee received a briefing on the lagoon project, I believe back in April this year. We have taken into account what was said in that briefing, and that has been referenced in the document itself. Obviously, the lagoon will probably be a long way away. Certainly, it will be something that we cover and review throughout the 10-year strategy that we're documenting.
I'm just interested in boats entering and leaving the harbour. I mean, I don't know how. I mean, clearly you would be able to go in and out of the harbour at high water, but what's your margin on either side, bearing in mind the tides change, what is every 12 and a half hours, something like that? So
I believe that one of the harbours is planned to be enclosed within the overall lagoon. The lagoon, as I understand it, is designed to hold water to allow egress and ingress from the harbour into the lagoon. As for access from the lagoon to sea, I'm sorry, I can't answer that question. But I would say that it is something that we are aware of, and we have made a reference to it within the overall strategy.
yeah, Marcus and I think Chris had
I was only going to add, bearing my recent declaration of interest, that actually this council does still own, I do believe, Culvercliff, which is west. Oh, sorry. Yeah, this council does still own, I think, Culvercliff, which is west of that way, and actually not too far from that, you currently have all ties access, not very great access. So, but I think when it comes to the big scheme of things, I think we're a long way away, and I'm sure technology will improve before then.
It's just a simple point about boats floating on water, and relative water levels are important. That's all. Henry.
Mr. Chairman, if you want me to go into the technicalities, I will do, but I can avoid it by saying to you that they are about to put one into Wales, and that it will improve. You know, you're shaking your head, Marcus. It's
Swansea Lagoon.
yes. Yeah. I am talking exactly about Tundi. I was involved in the technicalities of this, and it will actually increase the time that your harbours are open, because the water will be at the high tide level for considerably longer than it would have been if it had been left to nature.
Thank you very much. Chris, did you have a point?
Just that we've seen some of the early kind of artist impression style designs, and the intention is to have access points, specific access points within the lagoon, so that yes, it would hold water back. It would mean that the harbours are wet for longer, for more period, which we think is a better proposition, but it also allows access points to and from the sea at specific times. But beyond that, it's still in design phase, and will be for some time, I suspect.
I've got one more word: silt. Anyway, right. Are there any other questions or comments on this report? Okay, well, thank you, Sarah and Neil, for your input. very, very interesting. I think we've given it, we've asked quite a few questions. As far as I can see, the committee is fairly positive towards it, and there's obviously a lot of work gone in. And I think we've also recognised the fact that financially, the future is a little bit hazy. I think to say it was insecure, I think would not be right. But it's all about helping to wash its face against the backdrop, of course, of a council that is struggling financially anyway. I think in ordinary circumstances, everybody would welcome this, but the caveat is, of course, in the middle of a financial emergency, looking after assets like this is always going to be a worry. But overall, I think the strategy is a good one and points a clear direction. And if we can increase leisure and commercial trade into all the harbours, probably not too much commercial into Minehead, then we would be doing a good thing and keeping these historic places working. Anyway, thank you all very much. Without further ado, we'll move on to the Octagon. And Andrew Pulsford, I think, is Andrew and Sarah.
Going to be me.
Oh, it's you, is it?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm not sure who's sharing the slides.
This is.
Are you able to stand?
Yeah, this update has been brought because I was asked to take part in an urgent decision 4 or 5 weeks ago. And there was on this urgent decision, I was happy with it, but there was a bit of pushback from finance. So I had a briefing from Andrew as to how it was all going. And we thought it would be quite prudent to just bring a basic update report, presentation only, to the committee as things were going forward. I have 1 or 2 specific questions, and obviously members are invited to ask questions at the end of it. But again, Henry, I'm afraid there is no covering paper to this. It is merely a presentation as to where we are at the moment.
Okay, thank you. So the slides will be with you in just a second, and you'll notice a few things about them. The first is they are dual branded between ourselves and Yeovil Town Council, and we'll talk a bit more about Yeovil Town Council as we move through the briefing. So Andrew's also in the room, who's going to try and help me answer some questions as they come up. He's the designated project manager for our side of the delivery of this. And ultimately, this is an asset that we as Somerset Council own and inherited from one of the prior districts with a previous approval in place to deliver a specific scheme. So we'll talk to you about that. And again, just for confirmation, this sits under Councillor Federica Smith-Roberts' portfolio of services. So it sits within culture and under Federica. Thank you very much. So it's very small writing, but here we go. Here's the history. So South Somerset District Council, who were the owners and operators of the Octagon, identified that it was coming towards the end of its useful life and started off a programme to help refurbish the theatre. There was a lot of talk at the time about seating, but actually the more investigation work that was done, the more aged the facility was identified as being. So there was a programme put together and some support was identified from DCMS. So Department for Culture, Media and Sports offered an in-principle grant to then South Somerset District Council as part of a capital programme approval. And South Somerset accepted the principle of that grant. They were never given the money. It was never approved, but there was the in-principle decision from DCMS. And I think at that time it was around £15 million towards what was estimated to be a £23 million build programme, with South Somerset District Council borrowing the rest. There were some grants, some smaller fundraising pots. There was also a ticket levy applied. So for a period of time, if you bought a ticket to the theatre, you paid the price of the ticket for the show, and there was a ticket levy of about £1 applied to Westlands and to the Octagon, and that money was then put in a ring-fenced reserve in order to help fund this programme going forward. And some of that money we are now utilising. So the programme progressed into its various design phases. It was on the capital programme, but on the basis of its subsequent approval through DCMS money and borrowing. At a similar time as we headed towards Somerset Council and unitarisation, we, the project team at the time, it wasn't me at that time, but nevertheless, we, the project team, were working through various design phases, and the cost of build was climbing. So every time we went through a design phase, the cost of build was going up and up on each occasion. What we also found in the marketplace was that our borrowing costs were going up and up. So we've gone from a place where we had very, very low rates with PWLB. So the borrowing costs assumed within the business case were very low and deemed to be affordable. The intent really was to create a new refurbished theatre that would become self-sufficient, i.e. nil cost to the council. And of course, as costs rose and interest and borrowing rates rose, what that did is mean that the operation continued to be a revenue burden on the council. I use burden in a financial context. Clearly, the theatre serves an awful lot of the population. So we've had to do some revisions of the design. I took a report to Somerset Council in the first year since post-vesting and explained to Somerset Council that the scheme that they all thought was going to be delivered was not affordable. And Council supported a difficult decision to remove the current scheme from the capital programme in order to refresh the scheme and bring it back to something more affordable, whilst working really hard with Arts Council and DCMS to keep that grant pot in play. So we didn't have the money and we didn't have a formal approval, but nevertheless, DCMS had said to us, come back to us with something, find something that you can do, that you can afford, and we will consider it. And we will, didn't guarantee any money, but said, we will look enthusiastically at a future scheme. We commissioned some work to continue to cost the previous proposal, and at the point at which we removed it from the capital programme, we still didn't have the cost at that stage. The cost did later come back and it was over £40 million. So we knew we had to do a revision that was going to be significantly different from the iconic building that was once planned for the Octagon. And therefore we focused around a much more refurb, get the basics right. And we've got some artist impressions that I'll try and get up on screen in a moment, but it's very much about the core of the building. At the same time as having these conversations with Somerset Council, and then we have subsequently reapplied it to the capital programme. So you will now see it once again in the capital programme. It's assumed to be £15 million for a total delivery scheme, 10 million of which coming from DCMS still, we hope. 3.25, I think it is, coming from Yeovil Town Council, and the remainder via ticket levy and some of the money that's already been spent. At the same time as doing all of that, we as a council entered into various devolution conversations. So this local devolution now, transfer of services and assets, and a package arrangement was established with Yeovil, whereby they have taken on a range of service and asset functions, including staffing, and that includes operation of Westlands Theatre. So but the Octagon was closed for the intrusive surveys. The staff were moved to Westlands to continue that operation, and there were a large number of flexible agency staff, so casual staff as well. So we've only got the staff resource we need to run one theatre on the payroll, but we moved them all across to Westlands, and Westlands is now part of that devolution deal and has transferred to Yeovil Town Council. So we've had some very positive conversations with Yeovil Town Council. They've been very supportive of the principle of trying to keep the theatres going and been very helpful in terms of making financial contributions. So they are help funding some of the upfront work as we speak. So some of that work that we are doing now is being part funded by Yeovil, and they are about to launch a consultation on funding the capital scheme. We'll go through a bit more detail as we go, but next slide, if we may, please. So the intention, whilst we're not able to deliver this visionary and iconic venue that was once perceived, what we can still do is refurbish and put into good working order all of the plant, machinery, equipment and the physical infrastructure of the building. It needs bringing up to modern standards. It's a 1950s building that needs renovation. So our scheme focused on get the core right and give it a lifespan. We are required to improve accessibility. The rules have changed around DDA, Disability Discrimination Act, and the accessibility requirements since it was originally built, and the design takes account of all of that. So accessibility is a key feature of these new designs. We are seeking a revised and improved auditorium and rehearsal space. We're not adding additional seating though. To add additional seating would mean a very large extension, which would be unaffordable, and we'd be back into the scenario where this was not a viable scheme. So we've had to limit some of our ambition, but nevertheless, we're not reducing seating. We are refurbishing what we have and making the auditorium and rehearsal space a much better experience for patrons, as well as those who work and are putting on shows there. We need to improve the front of house. So the business case that sits behind all of this, the operating business case, takes account of all of the mechanisms by which we can make revenue. So by improving front of house, not only are we making it more attractive as a venue, but we're enhancing third-party spend. So people are coming in and they've bought their ticket, but we need them to buy an ice cream and a coffee and a pint of beer or whatever it might be. And all of that income supports the neutral operation of the theatre, or certainly a reduction in its revenue costs for the operator. We're making backstage accessibility improvements. We are improving the environmental impact of the building in terms of efficiency and energy measures, and are clearly, again, the more affordable the building is to run, the less the cost is for the operator, and that all fits into that business case. Front of house I've talked about, and we're improving stage flying. So there will be the ability to have full stage flight. It won't be a full height fly tower, but we will be able to have scenery flown out and down into the auditorium space and into the theatre itself. That makes a massive difference to the business case, because what it means is that shows that are limited to that style of scenery use can now come where they can't currently. So that tends to be your kind of West End, travelling West End show style. Those require flight, and that is something that was a key part of this regeneration scheme. Next slide, please. And then the next one to the phases. So the project's been through numerous phases, and when we talk phase one, we are talking about since this became a new scheme on the capital programme. There's a lot of work that was done in the past, and we're making use of as much of the surveys that were undertaken then as we can. But we talk phase one as being from when we started again with a new and a very different scope. So we're required to undertake a draft business case, and we have an external consultant supporting us on that. So every change we make in the build and design has the potential to have a positive or negative impact on the operating business case. You change the size of the bar, that changes the amount of people who are going to be served, that changes the amount of drinks that can be sold. So any impact in the build is a direct correlation into the business case. So we're required to do all of that behind the scenes, because ultimately we are intending to submit this full and final business case to DCMS. So the outline business case and the full business case are phrasing used by DCMS. We have an internal business case and a risk register and a project plan and a programme of works, but the outline business case and the full business case are very, very specific requirements for accessing that money, and we shouldn't confuse the two. So we've been through phase one, and the decision to move to phase two that Councillor Wren alludes to has been taken. That's a significant point for us. It moves us into a more advanced design stage, and it's the final phase before we would submit the outline business case for the money. It's a big deal. It requires a huge amount of time and energy and detail to give confidence to DCMS that if they put their £10 million in, that the project is deliverable and that the ongoing theatre is viable. We say it is. We have to evidence all of that in very finite detail. So that transition into phase two is the decision that was supported by Councillor Wren and ultimately made by the council, and that is a trigger point for some of our expenditure. So we are spending money now at risk. This council is spending that money on the belief that this will be a successful award that comes from DCMS, on the belief that Yeovil Town Council will be able to achieve support for the external funding, on the belief that we will deliver a robust and affordable project. So that is the stage that we are currently in. We will then submit that final business case to DCMS and they will review it, and hopefully they will continue their support for the project. All of their informal indications are that they will do so. And of course, we as officers can't guarantee their decision, but there have been numerous trigger points over the past 12, 18, 24 months where if government had wanted to withdraw this allocation of money, they could have done. There's been a budget and an autumn statement and a change of government. So there have been numerous trigger points where this could have been withdrawn, and we have seen other monies being withdrawn around the country, and this one has stayed. And we've got a very good and positive relationship with DCMS and also with the Arts Council, who are very much behind all of this. So that's a credit to the team in keeping that money in play, whilst at the same time not actually being able to offer anybody a guarantee on the outcome. So the intention here is obviously to gain that support. The approval in the capital programme is very specific. It is to place this into the capital programme for a sum of £15 million, but that we cannot spend any money on the build or award a contract until we've got DCMS approval and Yeovil Town Council approval, in the sense of their funding, but also the memorandum of understanding on the devolution. So our intent here is to build the product, and at the point it's built, commissioned, it then is transferred for operation to Yeovil Town Council. So they will take ongoing ownership and operation of this facility. That is a benefit to Somerset Council because during a time of financial emergency, as we were in when all of this was being discussed, a revenue cost to the council that is that is discretionary is very, very difficult to be able to argue with you all. So by having Yeovil Town Council support, not only are they putting in capital money towards delivery, subject to their consultation, but they will also take on the operation of the facility, and therefore this will be revenue zero cost to Somerset Council, and it will all be managed and operated by Yeovil Town Council, and we've already to be transferred the experienced staff, including the theatres manager. Everybody's very interested in the timetable, as you would expect, and there are so many nuances to the timetable, but our expectation is that the theatre will open during the financial year of 2028-29. I am not able to give you a more definitive timetable than that at this stage, because you can see where we are in the REBA stages. So the REBA stages are the physical design works associated with the building. So we're not at that point in time where we can give you credible dates on that, but also we are so dependent upon those external sources. Any extension to the decision-making timeline by DCMS will clearly have a knock-on effect as to when we can start, and that has a knock-on effect then to the build programme and its practical completion. Total spend, as you see on the bottom right-hand side of the slide, is 14.9 million, and there is a contingency built into that. Moving on, next slide, please. So as part of our governance arrangements, there is a project board which has, I think it's 12 members that sit on that project board, and they give oversight to the project arrangements. We met with that board last night, and we meet every couple of months, usually at key decision points. So though they're not a decision-making board, the decision sits with me, but clearly I am not, on behalf of the council, going to enter into a decision that isn't supported by members. So we use them as a sounding post as the designs emerge. There was a situation earlier in the year where the design was such that we couldn't afford to do the reseating in the theatre auditorium. That clearly wasn't an acceptable solution. And through that project board, we gave a new instruction to the design team that said, you need to figure that out. We want recoated seating. We want an improved auditorium experience. And if that means undertaking some value engineering elsewhere, find me some options and designs that allows us to do it. So we've had that iterative process in the design, not only with the designers and the consultants, but with that project group. We have now resolved that issue as a result of it. So there are positive changes happening in the design process as we go through that with the support of our members. So we're in a three-way arrangement here with Somerset Council's ownership. We've clearly got external support in terms of professional skills that are being brought into the project team, and we have Yeovil Town Council as the operator. So we're getting the benefit of all of those skills in how we build this and how we make sure that when we do have to make value engineering changes, that they then don't have an unduly negative impact on the revenue business case that I spoke about. So every time we change something, we revisit the business case affordability. We've been through the various milestones that we need to get to this stage, and there are various key and non-key decisions that had to be made in order to us move to phase 1, then phase 2. There will be future key decisions made in terms of signing off the full business case and its submission to DCMS, and we expect that we will need to come to council to get approval, because it would normally be council that has to take on and accept an application of a grant and ultimately the receipt of the money, because the receipt of the money comes with criteria. You don't get the money unless you build the thing. And the grant is given to us in arrears, so it would be a staged payment grant based upon the construction phases. Next slide, please. So I've spoken about it already, but we've got a really positive relationship with Arts Council and DCMS. And I can't emphasize that enough, because actually this was in the context of a financial emergency where we were talking about disinvesting in culture. And in fact, we did to a degree disinvest in culture, whilst at the same time as saying, can we still have your money? We're thinking really positively about how we manage cultural arrangements within Somerset. So we took out the culture directorate. That used to be an individual directorate in its own right, and we took that out. It's now merged in at a much smaller scale. So we're still delivering work, but we do not have kind of the focus that we had originally when we had that dedicated directorate. So we've had to work really hard on maintaining that relationship, and I'm really pleased to say that the team have done well to keep this in play. We're in the planning or early planning stages, so we have got pre-planning application advice being undertaken. This is different to the previous scheme, which had planning. So we can't simply say, well, because it's smaller, we can just use the previous planning. This will need to be a specific planning application on the basis of this scheme. That has caused some frustration, I think, for people, because it feels like duplication, but the reality is it's so different. We need to go back through the planning process. It also means that some of the information that is relied upon by the planning committee to reach that decision is out of date. So we are having to revise some of that as we go. It's frustrating, but if we want this decision, those are the rules at which we play by. The council has no preferential treatment. So the fact that we are the council asking the local planning authority for consent, we get no special treatment here. We are treated exactly the same way, and all of the decisions have to be robust and credible and defendable by the local planning authority. And we've talked already about, well, very briefly, I talked about the public consultation. So for Yeovil Town Council, they will be imminently, most likely Monday now, will be launching a public consultation specifically around the borrowing that they will undertake. So in order for them to provide the in excess of £3 million towards this capital project, they are undertaking a public consultation on their borrowing of that fund. We are obviously awaiting that launch, and we hope that the community of Yeovil will see the positive benefits of investing this money. Sorry, I'll speed up. In terms of finances, there is a breakdown here in terms of phase 1, 2, 3. All of those are identified. At the moment, we're using ticket levy money and Yeovil Town Council money. There is no Somerset Council revenue funding going into this project. We are using external sources, ticket levy, and any money that we are using in terms of to cash flow this. Once we receive those grants in, we'll go back to backfill some of that cash. So no revenue pressure here. What I will say, though, is if the capital scheme does not go ahead, then all of the capital money spent to date becomes revenue. It can only be capital if there's something delivered at the end of it. So there is a risk for the council here. We are spending some money at risk, and there is a further risk that that money could be turned back into revenue in the event the capital scheme doesn't go ahead. And we move on just to project governance. So as I've said, there are multiple partners involved here. Community Place and Economy Board, which is my area of the organisation, and then we have the member advisory, project advisory board. We have Yeovil Town Council directly involved. We have Arts Council that also attend that, and then we have the relationship with DCMS. Move forward a slide, please. How is that structured? So, thank you very much. How is that structured? Well, it all focuses realistically around the project team and then that programme management approach, and the project board aren't decision making, but nevertheless are key in terms of consultation, engagement and advice. The communication and consultation I have touched on briefly already, but nevertheless that gives you the key timelines ahead of that consultation beginning. Move on to risks and issues, please. So the key risk here is that the DCMS don't give us the £10 million. If they don't give us the £10 million, Yeovil don't give us the £3.25 million, and we have to turn the capital expenditure today back into revenue. So there's a lot hanging on the DCMS approval. They've given us a lot of positivity, but until that decision is made, there is a risk. The only way really to mitigate that risk would be to stop the project, and that would be the wrong thing to do, clearly. So we are accepting that there is risk involved here, and we are working positively with DCMS. Next slide, please. There are some normal generic risks that you would expect to see in any construction project. So costs exceed the allocated budget. Well, we're managing that by the contingency and also by value engineering decisions as we go. It doesn't deliver the cultural aspects that are required by DCMS. Well, the business case will allow for that to happen. We will meet the criteria set by DCMS. Project resources have been a challenge. They are much more stable than they once were. Now we're into the different phasing. We've got Andrew on board, which is a great help to us all. And we've got external support in terms of the designers, quantity surveyors and such like. And there are various others in terms of commercial contracts and so forth. So none of this has yet been tendered. So all of the pricing here relies upon us being able to achieve that value in the marketplace. That's going to be a risk to us, but nevertheless, we are managing that, we believe, within a contingency. There is another risk here in just in kind of transactional. So we need to be able to make timely decisions. So the council's timetable for this is very tight. Whilst it's long, it's a very complex project. So we are trying to forecast now the different key decision points so that we either got them in the forward plan, or in some instances, we might be able to make those decisions early, but predicated on certain things. A bit like we've added it to the capital programme, subject to that money from DCMS. And that's it. Sorry, I sped up very much at the end there.
Yeah, well, thank you, Chris. There's a lot of stuff in there, but we have a timetable to keep to. So I've got a couple of members who've caught my eye. Henry, first, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was involved in the original decisions as a member of the Cabinet. And I've got a number of questions as a consequence. The first and foremost is that the whole of this plan was predicated on saving £200,000 a year, which is what the subsidy was to run the theatre. And it was working with Westlands under the same manager to ensure that there were no outgoing revenue costs. So my first question is Westlands making any money, or are we having to, or is Yeovil having to fund their revenue intake? I have more questions after that. That's all right, Mr. Chairman.
I don't know in front of me. I'll get the answer and come back to you.
Thank you very much indeed. The second thing that was important here is that at the time I suggested that we actually tried to get patrons from the theatre community in Somerset, of which there are quite a lot of very well-off people. Nothing was done about it. Has anybody looked into trying to get funding from people like Cameron McIntosh, people like Koos Becker, people like, I can't remember the three actors who now live in Somerset, one of whom is living in Boltonsborough, because that would seem to me a useful, if you do decide to go ahead, a useful method of actually getting in some outside funds to go take this forward, because there was interest about having a patronage system.
So simple answer is yes. Some of those conversations have been had. There are other grant funds that are held that have come from some of those external sources. And there was also an arrangement whereby we had obviously the ticket levy, but there was also an opportunity for people to contribute some funds towards reseating, and we've kept that pot as well.
Okay, that's not mentioned in here.
No, so we haven't broken down the individual funding streams. We've given a project overview from a construction project perspective, but all of that is within the 14.9 million.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Henry. Edric, please.
Thank you. I appreciate we can't do the extension to extend the seating. Is there a worry that attracting big acts at an affordable price will be affected by the inability to have more seating so that ticketing can be more affordable? I was led to believe in the early stages, I may be wrong, that one of the problems of smaller provincial theatres is the inability to attract big acts in affordable costs, because the ticketing has to be unaffordably expensive due to the number of seatings available.
Yeah, so there's always a challenge on seating numbers. If we could have a 900 plus seating theatre, I think we would attract different shows. However, the business plan and the operator believe that we can attract the performances at the right level to be able to fill the theatre. There was a good experience with the Octagon. It was routinely operating at high 80–90% occupancy, and therefore it's believed that we can attract the right things that audiences will want to see. Will we be able to attract the really big shows and compete around the country? That will be a challenge because of seating numbers. And sometimes it's not just a balance of cost. Some shows won't come unless you have the right level of occupancy.
Okay, thank you. Wes Reed, please.
Thank you, Chair. Wes Reed, Yeovil West. Thank you, Chris, for such a concise breakdown. I think you deserve a lie down, really, to be honest. You did mention earlier that the benefit, obviously, members in the room have never seen the current design, that you may have some slides you could show us. I mean, I've obviously seen them. Obviously, it means we've been to a YTC, but it's quite different, the new design, obviously, from the previous design. Is that possible? Thank you.
Yes, I think Chris is going to put them up on the screen any moment now. That was your request? Yeah, okay. Marcus.
Thank you, Chair. Theatres. Interesting enough, I mean, it was, same issues arrived in, in a former life in Taunton with a proposed plan for a theatre there. That, a very nice document on all that. That was years ago. Obviously, it was always a bit of a shock that some theatres in Somerset were subsidised, yet in a charming place called Minehead, there's a very charming theatre there. They never had any public subsidy. In fact, I'm pretty certain there was a conversation when they wanted a new lift, because they wanted some money, and the attitude was, well, leave them long enough, they'll raise it themselves anyway. As it happens, I think they did get just a small contribution of 106 money towards a new lift many years ago, and then since then they put a new roof on. Hasn't cost the taxpayers a penny of Minehead or Somerset. So it always does sort of shock me when I see these figures of £20 million, and imagine what sort of football stadium Taunton Town could build with 20 million quid, things like that. But that said, I understand the arts benefit, and I understand the theatre benefit, and I understand the need for theatres, etc. But I was looking at the timeline, and 2025 now. 2019, that's when it first started. We're now in 2025. We're now talking about 2028, let's be honest, in realistic terms. It'll probably be 2029. That's almost 10 years. And that's a lot of delays. And I just wondered, I mean, I assume we're just in a circumstance where these things take a long time and none of it's avoidable. But the concern obviously is that, one, I suppose my question is, are any of these delays then being avoidable? Are we happy that, we've done everything in this council's power, or even the previous council's power, to have made it happen as quick as possible? And I think that's probably my question, my other concern was conversations that we had about theatres before, and I think you've touched on it there, Chris, was about numbers. I think I went to the Octave once in my life. I think that's watched a dance show, a junior dance show. Highly not recommended for anybody who wants to go and watch a dance show. But it was quite a charming theatre, but I do remember it not being, I have vague memories of it not being very big. So I just wondered what the current seating capacity is, what the new seating capacity will be. And we've always had this magic number of being banded around 400 people, but actually, as Chris said, 900 people is probably a lot better. I think that's probably what Barnstable holds actually about that. So I wonder whether long-term viability, we're confident with that, but that'll come out in the business case. But my other question, I suppose, have not wanting to be parochial, but judging by phase two, we've got circa 1.4 million. If this doesn't happen and we don't get that DCMS grant funding, that's quite a big gamble, bearing in mind how many buses from Minehead to Bridgewater 1.4 million would buy. That's quite a big gamble this council's taking. And I wonder, I assume we're quite I assume this decision won't be made unless everybody's very confident in that. But, where does that money come from if we don't get that grant money? Thank you.
Thanks, Mark. So I think you make a good point about the length of time some of these projects take to come to fruition. And clearly, the longer it goes on, there's always a risk that something will go wrong financially. But I think Chris has covered it off quite well in the presentation. But Chris, is there anything else you want to add?
Yeah, just quickly, I'd say this is not delayed. It might feel like it's delayed, but we stopped the project. It was terminated because it was not viable, and we have had to start again. So I know there are media reports saying it is delayed. It is not delayed. Because of that distinctive, we terminated as a council and said this was not something we could take forward. So I would encourage us to think about when the clock started was when we reapplied this to the capital programme, not the 2019 dates. Seating is unchanged. So I think it's 620 something. There might be a marginal reduction if we have to change something for accessibility reasons, but otherwise seating numbers are not increased, but they are not reduced either. The 1.4 million, yes, it's a risk. We believe that it's a risk worth taking. We are funding that with a share of that risk with the Yeovil Town Council and through the ticket levy. The ticket levy was collected and held specifically for the regeneration of the theatre. So to spend it on something else would be wrong, and to spend it on this is obviously the right thing to do.
Okay, thank you very much. Susanna Hart, please.
I really am struggling with this whole thing. I don't see how, as a council, we can consider the financial situation that we're in, that it's responsible for us to be still talking, spending officer time and going ahead with this project. It's like a family saying to me, yay, we're going to put in a cinema room with surround sound and it's going to be amazing. And me going, the ceiling's leaking in the baby's bedroom. The baby hasn't got cot to sleep in and the hot water's on the blink. So we can't kind of, safely care for this baby anymore. I just think this whole thing is irresponsible. But regardless of that, the council have decided to plough ahead with it. I still don't like the way it's being presented to us as something that is going to be a zero cost. I think that's just not true. I'd like to actually know how much money has been spent to date. And I know we can't put together a figure of how much has been spent in terms of officer time alone, but how much actual money has been spent dismantling the place, getting tenders in, it's money, it's all money. Also, the ticket levy you refer to, is this ring fenced somewhere and actually no way can it be spent on anything else? So that's a small pot of money. It's a really small pot when you look at the overall cost of this, which is still only an estimate. And we know that our estimates to date with this project have been really not very accurate. There's also the 106 monies, which we're acting like it's not Somerset's money. It is Somerset's money. It could be spent better in other places. It's not, I don't think this is a great idea. It's a great idea in an ideal world, but I don't feel like we're living in an ideal world right now. And I think there are other things that we should be spending our time, our focus, and any monies that we've got on.
Thank you, Susanna. Clearly, this is something the council, as you point out, has decided to proceed with. Chris, are there any of those points you wish to address?
Well, in terms of the funding, we can get you a better breakdown, but the slides do show what the costs are for each phase, and those are the money spent. So I don't think I'm misleading anyone in this room in terms of the costing. When we talk about being cost neutral to Somerset Council, we're not putting revenue funding into this. It's coming from other sources. Whether those other sources could or should be spent in a different way is a different question entirely, but I'm being honest and transparent in terms of the makeup of this as a construction project. There are always risks in construction projects. We are trying to manage those risks in terms of their costs. In terms of the ticket levy, it was collected for a specific purpose and it is ring fenced, held in part by this council and subsequently by Yeovil Town Council, who are now the operators of Westlands. Westlands transferred on the 1st of April. So that is a ring fenced fund with the expectation that that's what it's spent on. That's what we told the public we would do with it.
Okay, thank you. Right, I've got several people. I've got one more speaker and a couple want to come back. Liz Lashon, you indicated. Where's this first?
Yeah,
Well, no, I'll take Liz because I think she's addressing that particular point. So, and then I've got Bob, Henry, Wes, and Marcus, and then I think we have to draw it to a close.
Just a few points on the ticket levy money that shows on the reserves at vesting. So you can see the line in, it came from South Somerset District Council. It then, as we put all the reserves together for the one council, it's clearly a line in there. I've kept my eye on it all the way through since before vesting, as you'd expect. The devolution to Yeovil Town Council and the involvement in the Town Council and the Town Council going out to consultation on borrowing further monies. It is Yeovil Town Council working with Somerset Council that has made the difference and enabled us to put this project back on the capital programme. Without the Town Council, we would not have been able to do that. And frankly, we did not have a plan B, except that the building was empty. We went ahead with the intrusive work to establish exactly how the building was constructed to make sure that there wasn't asbestos we didn't know about, because whatever happened to the building, we needed that information. And the big risk for Somerset Council is that we don't go ahead with the project, that we're unsuccessful with DCMS grant and it reverts back to revenue. So that would be the money spent by South Somerset District Council and the small amount of money that this council has spent since. So for me, there's risk in the project and there's considerable risk in not pursuing the project. But it is a situation that was here at vesting. I believe that huge amounts of time and effort, including by members, have been put forward, and I'm never confident on a big capital project because you can't be until everything is signed and it's delivered. But I am still very hopeful, and the project board, particularly the chair of the project board, Councillor Mike Best, has done a sterling job in holding that professional team to account to ensure that we can get the fly tower in that £15 million cost, because without the fly tower and the ability to fly out cloths without tumbling them, and I'll give you all the other technical implications if you want outside this meeting, without that we would not be able to be confident that Yeovil Town Council could extend the programme and do more with that theatre. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Liz. Bob Filmer, please.
Thank you, Chair. It was just a couple of queries. On page 73 and in your presentation, you mentioned obviously we're in for pre-application planning at the moment and then a new planning application. Would just like, bearing in mind the next paper that we're going to be looking at, that you're not worried that that might impinge on your timetables. Again, the ticket levy has been mentioned is not something I'm across, but I think the commitment here looks like there's about 850,000 potentially that's being drawn from that. So just wanted confirmation that those funds are in place and available. Again, for someone who's looking at this afresh, on page 78, there's the senior client group. Just for that presentation, it would be useful to have full names on there, because some people referred to by first name, some by initials, and it was quite difficult to follow sort of who's who. And the last question was on the point that actually cancellations just mentioned in terms of the risks. On page 82, it says that if things don't go as hoped, we could be liable for up to £2.9 million to hit the revenue budget. So just wanted confirmation as to where that comes from.
Yeah, please, Chris.
Yeah, so planning in for pre-planning application advice at the moment. No, I don't believe that the prioritising determined decisions period will impact it. It's a 12-week period, as you know, anyway. And this is a broader scheme, so no, I don't believe that will cause an impact. The ticket levy is actual cash held in Somerset Council's accounts and in Yeovil's accounts, so we are drawing from that. But yes, it's real, it's there, it exists. We can update the slides. I'll ask Andrew to do that with a more consistent naming. And if the capital works to date has to be turned back to revenue, it will become a pressure for the council, and we'll have to decide where that sits. It will likely be either a reshuffling of other budgets, depending upon where we are at that point at a given time. If there are underspends or a use of reserves, we'll have to deal with that, but that is a risk, yes.
Right, I've got three councillors who want to come back. Can I ask you all to be brief, please, because we then need to move on to the planning item. I've got Henry first, and then Wes, and then Marcus.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer Edric's point, the whole point of tying Westlands with the Octagon was that Westlands has more seating capacity than the Octagon does, and they were going to be under the same management. Adam, can't think of his surname, who's still named on here, so I presume he's still involved. And he wanted to offset between the two venues to maximise the return from that department, if that makes sense. And I presume that's what Yeovil are continuing to look at, which is why I asked my question about Westlands a minute ago, because if Westlands is profitable, there is much more scope for the Octagon to be working with it.
Okay, thank you. I see I've got Councillor Oakes online as well. I'll just deal with the people in the room, Graham, before I come back to you. Wes?
Thank you, Chair. Just to clarify Councillor Kravis's question about the seating arrangements in the Octagon. For many years, from design point of view, the Octagon always had disabled rails. So in other words, in specific parts of the theatre, certain rails of lengths of seats can be taken out for disabled seating. But obviously every disabled seat takes up perhaps 1.5 sort of standard seats. So the configuration would be around about 625 or 600-ish. But the original idea with putting a mezzanine floor in was to create a 300 space more. So we had 900 seats. That was the original idea. Obviously it's not going to happen now, but that's approximately where we are as far as I'm aware. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Marcus, did you want to come back on that?
Well, thank you, Chair. Actually, I think my question is probably just both been answered by both Henry and Wes. The question, I suppose that was my question, was about the capacity. I mean, I think the overall Town Council need a big congratulations for stepping up to the plate. I think, you know, that's what we all hope town councils would turn into. And please that more town councils feel they're in a position to actually do such a thing, and or maybe even borrow money if they need to do something. But I think, I mean, that's it's an actual bespoke, that's what I'm looking for, theatre. At 650, I presume, okay, you're saying Westlands holds more, and I should think Wellsprings Leisure Centre holds more, but you know, you wouldn't want to go, personally, as it says leisure centre now, I don't fancy going to see things in the leisure centre. But it's a bespoke theatre. Are there many more in Somerset with a theatre capacity bigger than 650? I'm trying to think of, you know, Bridgewater's not that big. I mean, that would make it a prime theatre for Somerset, wouldn't it? It would be the biggest. Is that, am I right in that? And as I said, I'd just like to highlight that I do understand the economic benefits of such a project.
I think that must be the largest theatre in Somerset, I would have thought. Yeah.
Yes.
Councillor Graham Oakes, please, online.
Thank you, Chair. I think it depends on whether you consider Bath to be part of Somerset. I think Theatre Royal there is bigger. The Octagon has been a highly successful regional theatre, and if you look at where the ticket sales have come from, it is the theatre really for Somerset and Dorset. Massive thing. And we get ticket sales from all over the United Kingdom, except for Northern Ireland. And despite my recent visit, I've yet to know whether I've managed to persuade some of our Irish friends to come across. I wanted to just answer Councillor Hart's thing. I'm not sure if she's aware that Yeovil Town Council have taken on £1 million worth of expenditure for Somerset Council. So we've been very supportive, because I'm both the town councillor and a Somerset councillor. So, and this was all part of the wider deal, that it was all considered to be our own local devolution. Some of the money is coming for fundraising that was done within the town specifically for projects for the Octagon. Other money is coming from the ticket levy, both Westlands and the Octagon, specifically for the Octagon for this project. And the Section 106 money was in the days of South Somerset District Council, because it seems to have stopped now with Somerset Council. The 106 money specifically were elements that were for culture and arts in South Somerset. So this money can't go anywhere else. It has to be spent in this way. And if the decision was taken not to spend that money in that way, the effect on the reputation of Somerset Council would be devastating. Because this whole project is based largely on trust between two councils working openly together for the good of the people of Somerset. So I'm hoping this committee will, they've had some good questions, it's great, but I'm hoping that they will support this project, because we go to consultation next week and the people of Yeovil will be reassured if this committee supports this scheme. Thank you.
Right, thank you very much. Okay, I'm going to sum up now, because we do need to move on. I think we've had a very comprehensive presentation. I think we've had some quite searching questions as well. And it's fairly clear to me that whilst this might be termed an exciting project, it's not without its risks, which whether you think that contributes to the excitement or not, I suppose is up to you. But we seem to be going forward, and the indications are that the government will be supportive. So I think overall, I have a positive vibe from this committee in relation to it. What I will ask Chris Hall, though, is at what point does this committee need to come back and have another look at the progress? I mean, in terms of, are we expecting, there are key points coming up. So there's the planning, which I suspect is a little way off. But the key point would appear to be negotiations or discussions with DCMS and Arts Council. When are we expecting to get sort of white smoke on that, or any smoke?
I might have to defer to Andrew, and we might have to come back to you in terms of when we bring it back. So there's a sequencing here in terms of when we submit the application to DCMS, and they have a fairly large period of time in which to give us their confirmation. And I wonder whether we can put something in the forward plan to come back to this committee once we've got the white smoke, as you describe it, out of DCMS. But I'll have to do that off stage and get the timetable together.
Okay, so bearing in mind that the revised business plan will form the basis of the submission, I mean, does the business plan require scrutiny in your view, or in the view of the committee?
By all means, of course, it will have gone through the member project team, but if the request of the committee is to see it, we can make that happen.
The members of the committee have a view on that?
Yeah, I personally think it's a good idea coming back here personally.
I think what we'll try and pencil in is the business plan when it's on its way or about to go or whatever. There are no procedural problems with that.
No, we can make that happen. We'll look at the timetable off stage and come back to you.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you very much. Right, thank you everybody. That was a good debate, I think. We'll now move on swiftly to the emergency planning changes. We're running a few minutes behind. But Chris, again, I think this is down to you. Now, just a bit of context. This ordinarily would have come to Climate and Place. Climate and Place has a very full agenda and isn't meeting till the end of the month. Bearing in mind these changes have only recently been implemented. A request was made and I've liaised with Martin Dimmery to bring it to this committee exceptionally today, which is why it is before you. So it is I think clearly it's a matter of great importance to every councillor in the county, and I think it's important that this is a matter that is debated in front of a scrutiny committee, and that duty now falls to us. So, Chris, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. So, yes, as you explained, this would normally go to a different scrutiny committee, but nevertheless, one thing that's important to understand is that this isn't a formal decision. So effectively, I, as the senior officer, have reprioritised resources in order to meet the unsustainable workload and backlog that we currently have. So it hasn't come to scrutiny on a journey to a decision, because ultimately it's a resourcing decision in the hands of officers. But nevertheless, it is significant, which is why we undertook a member briefing. And obviously we faced a number of questions during that briefing. In the pack for today is the slides from that briefing. I appreciate you will also have had those as they were disseminated to everybody following the briefing that evening. So I don't know that it's worthwhile going through the slides again, but just as a reminder, the issue here is one of incoming workload volumes exceeding our ability to make determinations in a swift manner. The average caseload for an effective a case officer would be around 5 weeks work in progress per officer. We're operating in some instances up to around 11 weeks. That means that there is delay in determinations, which is causing additional frustration with applicants and agents and developers, and they in turn are making significant contact with the council. So we've got ourselves into a place of not being able to manage the workload and determine decisions quickly enough, and then a wave of frustration and correspondence, complaints, FOIs, data subject access requests, escalation to members, escalation to the chief exec. All of that is then hitting the team, and they're having to respond to each of those in a bespoke fashion to find out, well, where is the application? At what stage is it? When might it be coming to committee? What is it that's outstanding? Are the elements that are outstanding actually in planning, or are they in highways or ecology, or are they in statutory consultees? And that means that the team have become so focused on answering why they aren't doing the job, they can't do the job. So the process here is to reallocate resources. So anybody who reasonably and competently can take a caseload is being asked to take a caseload, and we are setting up a separate triage approach to manage all incoming correspondence. Some of that incoming correspondence will get a standardized response that says, thank you, here's the story, here's why we are doing this, here's what we are doing, and this is what it means to you. Our hope is that people will be happy that we are focused on doing the job over focused on responding to their concern. But we know that people can't sustain that forever. We've got a 12-week window of opportunity to focus on making decisions, which in turn will bring the backlog down, but also over a period of time, we'll see less correspondence from frustration because the work will be being done. It's a proven mechanism that's been used in other councils, but it does rely upon everybody holding the line. So if members, officers, agents try and bypass the system and come to someone specific, we will put it into that single email account. It will still be triaged. So things that are desperate, things that absolutely require a response will get one, but the run-of-the-mill generic will get a holding response. That enables us to free up the time. The time is then put into determining applications. The more that are determined, the less frustration, and we start to get a snowball effect, because every time there's less frustration, any extra time at any point goes into determination. So those are the headline summaries. I appreciate you wanted to have the debate. I've got Alison Blom-Cooper on the call as well. She's in the midst of another planning matter, but has joined us online, and therefore we're happy to take any questions we can.
Okay, I've got one councillor at the moment, Henry. Now, Henry, I know you want to talk about phosphates, but I don't want to go down a phosphate wormhole, if you don't mind. What I want the debate to concentrate on is the decisions that have been made, the impact on it, and the expectations over the 12-week period. So if we could keep it reasonably focused, I'd be grateful. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I fully understand. As a member, as the Vice Chair of Climate and Place, the chair is actually on a 2-week banned tour around the UK, so this is why it is here. I'm going to speak for no more than a minute on phosphates. The fundamental problem with the whole phosphate thing is the amount of time it takes the officers to put the mitigation into place. And the fact that we have now got a 6-month waiting list for 106 legal opinions, because every one of the legal opinions has to have a phosphate opinion in it. This has been going on since 2021. We had a joint legal submission, and I wish to read that, Mr. Chairman, because it is fundamental to this debate. The resolution of these matters is not a point of law. This is from our joint barristers, but an issue of fact for the council. Should the council establish that Wessex Water has at least 4 tonnes per annum of phosphate stripping for mitigation for anticipated housing, the council may legitimately take that into account in the appropriate assessment for the planning application, depending on the factual circumstances of the catchment. That is one of the things it says. This opinion came in March this year. We have still not activated using Wessex Water's mitigation, which is free of charge. And we have still not changed the 106 agreements so that every single agreement on phosphates is identical. So there's no special knowledge needed on any of this. Mr. Chairman, I'm quite happy to take questions. I know that Chris Hall's been trying to put this into place, and that we are still, and we are now August, we have still not activated it.
Okay. Basically, what your point is that the whole phosphate industry that we have is very time consuming. The advice you have received would relieve us of that particular burden and therefore free up resources. I think that's the basis of your point in this debate.
Mr. Chairman, it wasn't me that received the advice. It was a joint statement to both the council and me that came into this council on the 13th of March this year.
But the point is that the legal advice,
it's barrister's legal advice.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have actually quoted for it, section 14.
Right, thank you. Chris, did you want to respond to that point? Or?
So we are reviewing the opinion received. There are some elements that require us to take further evidence, and we're working with the lead member on doing so, but we are not in a position at this stage to make alterations.
All right, thank you. Marcus, please.
Nice second. I'm trying not to end up in a planning rant if I can avoid it.
Please don't.
Oh, I know, but I do like a good rant on planning. I have to. I'm concerned. Yeah, concerned is probably too strong a word. Yeah, only accept amendments to applications in limited circumstances. Well, surely we want to get the. Yeah, surely we're there to encourage development and want to make sure it's right, and we don't want to see refusal if unnecessary. Only essential site visits will be undertaken. I don't know what the definition of the word essential is. I do recall once, trying to get. I do recall once arguing for planning, probably quite badly, obviously, the planning committee that needed a site visit, and obviously it was blatantly obvious that nobody in that site meeting wanted a site visit. So, definition of essential. I do get the feeling it's not just planning here that's a mess. I think planning nationally, I think the system's broken. I think Angela Rayner knows it's broken. Please God, she sorts it out. I think it's broken from the bottom up. I look at this, an enforcement officer to be allocated breach condition investigation. And we still got, how many enforcement officers do we now have? And then the problem is that all actually anybody cares about is enforcement, because for some reason that's the most important thing in the world. I can understand the logic of it, but I do think sometimes it gets out of control. And I mean, who'd want to be a planning officer, then who'd want to be an enforcement officer, particularly in the west of the county? I don't know what it's like in the east. And I sit there at parish council now, parish council meetings, and they say we can't get hold of anybody. I put my hands up and say, I've got teams and I can't get hold of anyone. And especially particularly maybe it's officers to, maybe it's just me, but they don't reply maybe as quick as they used to on Teams. And I'd be very concerned if suddenly as an elected member, our inquiries are being triaged. If it was a housing matter, my inquiries were being triaged, I'd be slightly more furious. As it's planning, maybe I would be less furious. Tend to leave, I don't make very many comments as an elected member on planning matters. But it's things like that that I think may make it worse. And I take Chris's point that you've got 12 weeks, otherwise it's an ever increasing circle. I assume, Chris, you wouldn't be putting this to us if you didn't think it would work, and whether you thought that we can do it in 12 weeks. And there was another question, which is just to show that I do read an agenda occasionally. 85% of applicants fail validation. That was slightly, I'm gobsmacked. But then you then ask him to do it within 14 days. So we're asking them to do it in 14 days. I've had a planning application since February, I think. So I declare an interest, I suppose. Not heard anything from it. Problem I'm going to have is come October, I might have to start work. Who knows? West Somerset Free Press will be happy about it though. So yeah, it's how we're suddenly saying you have to do it within 14 days or your application won't be valid. Yet we can take as long as we want. So from that sort of point, I'm just a little bit cautious, but I can understand. I'm pleased to see the urgency in it. I'm pleased to see what we're trying to achieve. And if I believed in one, I would pray to God that it all works. Thank you very much. And that wasn't a rant.
Well, okay, thank you, Marcus. And I think in terms of your initial point about the shortage or difficulty recruiting planning officers, that is indeed a national problem, and I'm sure Alison will be able to help us with that. What I don't understand is how our difficulties in recruitment actually equate with the amount of caseload that we've got, whether we just have more in this, whether we're a particularly busy planning department. I think you make a very good point about the validations, and perhaps we're just too nice and try to be too helpful. I don't know, but I don't know whether Alison and Chris want to pick up on any of those points.
Can I come in first, and then perhaps Alison will pick up anything I missed? So a few bits. You asked about a definition of essential. We don't have a definition of essential. The team will triage. The team will use their discretion to identify what really needs a site visit rather than an assumed site visit for all. The Planning and Infrastructure Bill has the potential to make some really big changes around this, not least of which how we can charge for planning services. So that has an immediate beneficial impact on the way that we can structure the team, the way that we can resources within that team, and the way that we recover the costs of that team. But we're not quite there yet. In terms of enforcement officers, I've forgotten the number. I think it's about 8, but Alison will have to correct me. I just want to correct something on the validation. So 85% of them come in and they are not valid. And what our team are doing is working hand in glove with these applicants to try and get them over the line. And we're saying we are putting too much time into the thing that should have been right when it was delivered. So the 14 days isn't you've got 14 days or we've got 14 days. It's there's a problem with your application. These are the types of things that are problematic with it. If you want us to keep this application live, you need to deal with all of that in 14 days. If you don't, the application is closed down. That's it. So it's a change of behaviour required by applicants to ensure that they put something in that is sensible and robust amongst the criteria, accepting the fact that for some people this is a professional job for them, and some people are householder applicants who've never done it before. So we didn't want a really hard line for those people who just need a bit of extra help and support, and we will. But there has to be a cut-off point because the energy going into it is unsustainable. The planner's point around recruitment, I'm sure Alison again will probably touch on it, but the recruiting planners, inexperienced planners isn't necessarily difficult, but senior planners, given the key infrastructure and nationally significant projects we have within Somerset, is really challenging for us. So the marketplace is very, very difficult, and we are a very large authority. But Alison, did you want to add anything?
Thank you, Chris. Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. Just to say that in terms of enforcement, we've got 9.8
posts in the enforcement team. 6.8 of those are currently filled. We've just appointed an enforcement team leader, an agency post. Because of the financial position of the council, we haven't been able to fill all of the vacant posts in enforcement because we have to keep 2 posts vacant essentially for 1 agency post. So we are about to go out to recruit. More generally, I'm pleased to say that the council has agreed some recruitment allowances which should make us more competitive in the marketplace, and I'm hopeful that we will be successful in the next few months in filling those posts.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Alison. I see the portfolio holder, Mike Rigby's online. Mike, did you want to add something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I just want to make a couple of quick points here. Chris has covered the validation issue. I mean, it's a shockingly high number. And as he rightly points out, we've got professional planning advisors not really doing their job on a fairly regular basis, and we need to get to grips with that. And I think in that vein, we will obviously have a review of how these changes have performed as we approach the 12-week period. And it may well be that some of these changes we decide are very sensible things to do anyway. The validation stuff to me strikes me as quite a sensible change to make permanently. Some of the things that we proposed here or that we're actually implementing, for example, drafting in qualified planners from other teams into the development management function, that doesn't have a long-term future. That's something we'll have to have an end date on at some point. But I think some of these changes, I just want to make the point, are probably likely to stay in place for the longer term because, frankly, they're sensible business as usual options. One of the difficulties we've had is that our pay is set primarily by the original pay and grading scheme that Somerset County Council ran, and that was quite poor in some areas, and so our planning officers have been paid historically less than they might have been even in our neighbouring authorities, let alone as compared with the private sector. And one of the things that we've done to try and combat that is to introduce recruitment and retention allowances. They've historically not been high enough, but we've just raised those again. So I think that'll give us the opportunity to compete much better in the market. Just wanted to add those things, Chair.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I always remember passport applications. If your signature went outside the box, they just chuck it straight back at you. So validation is not an unusual occurrence. The other point I was going to make was in relation to, you alluded to some of these changes potentially becoming permanent in the longer run. And from that point of view, are there any plans to bring the success or otherwise of this particular 12-week measure to a scrutiny committee, to the Climate and Place Scrutiny Committee in due course?
I've got no objection to that, Chair. I think that would be sensible.
Okay, thank you very much. I've got Tom Power, please.
Thank you. It's only a quick point. And I was just a bit surprised yesterday when we had this briefing come through with the planning emergencies, then because I sit on Planning South, and then I see that some of my planning meetings have been cancelled, and I thought, well, if we've got an emergency planning, why are meetings being cancelled? I know it's August, people might be away, but we can get substitutes. You know, it just gives a wrong message. I feel planning meetings are being cancelled when we're in a planning emergency, when we've got such a backlog, and planning meetings are being cancelled. Thank you.
Alison?
The meeting in South has been cancelled because there were no applications that were ready to go to that committee meeting. We do from time to time need to cancel meetings and have done so over the last year when we haven't had applications ready to go that meet the criteria set out in the Constitution. Again, it frees up a lot of officer time to prioritise and get on with the decisions on all the other applications. So I would say it was a good use of time to free up officers in that way.
Yeah, I think the concern is obviously that avoiding meetings is not a solution to the backlog, shall we say, and shouldn't be seen to be. And of course, you know, I think Councillor Power has possibly put 2 and 2 together. I don't know.
Well, I didn't put sorry, Alison, but I didn't put 2 and 2 together. But the fact is that my inbox, I'm getting inundated with Planning South emailing me new application. Yeah, they might not all be together, but then I've got my parish councillors, I've got residents emailing me, where's this application, what's going on? And then when they're going to see if the meetings have been cancelled, it's not exactly a good look. I get where you're coming from, but from the outside view in, it's not exactly a very good look. Thank you.
I think one of the things I wanted to get out of this particular meeting was an understanding from the officers' side of the pressures they're under, so that we and our colleagues elsewhere are in a much better position to go back to parishes. Because I've been to various parish council meetings over the last week or 10 days, and I've had some quite searching questions about this, as I'm sure we all have. I think this is a very useful session from that point of view. Kathy, next, please.
Thank you. Some of my questions have been answered in the other things, but just to say, I agree with the measures being taken given the situation, and I'm too shocked with the validation. The responsibility must lie with the applicant. Are we happy? Are we happy as we can be about the recruitment, the salary levels being pitched to be attractive? Because I'm stating the obvious, the last bullet point on page 88 about the cost of agency posts, and that's no criticism of the agency planners. We've really been grateful to them, but the report as it stood did seem like treating the symptom rather than the cause. But I think the debate that's followed has shown that there is measures being taken to treat the cause as well. So the only thing that hasn't been talked about so far is the ICT systems and the work going on to address that. An update on that would be really useful.
Professor Allison.
Yeah, in terms of the recruitment, so recruitment has been a real challenge. We've come from 5 organisations paying on different pay grades, different scales, similar people doing similar work, people doing similar work at various different pay grades. And whenever there's a vacancy for the new authority, and we're not new now, but it's new in the context of JE, that role has to be regraded and it's point scored, and then we convert those points into the pay, and we recognise that there is an issue between the point transition and the pay grades that we are using, and there is a pay and grading review that is underway and timetable to deliver, but it's about 18 months away for the whole organisation. So we know that, but that's not good enough, and Alison's worked really hard with the team to put in a recruitment and retention business case to HR, so we can put a recruitment allowance on roll, so we have the grade. We don't think that's sufficient in the marketplace, and we've proven it because we failed to recruit, and we add a recruitment allowance to it that allows us to then hopefully recruit in a what is a competitive environment. And we've also got some points of retention, so what we don't want is people leaving because there's a pay issue, and therefore we've looked at a recruitment allowance for certain roles as well. So that is a business case that's top to bottom in terms of the development management team that has been agreed, signed off, and we are in the process of applying that to applications, to adverts. So we are trying to treat that as well, but it has been a lengthy process to get the necessary support in place. But yeah, we're absolutely treating that as well. In terms of the ICT systems, a business case has been put forward into the transformation programme. There's also the opportunity to combine a planning system with potentially a regulatory and operational system for licensing and environmental health. So we're looking at how some of this work is grouped, and we also need to look at, is this an out and out planning system that we need, or do we need a much more clever system of AI that helps manage some of this workload? So rather than going to your traditional planning system providers, with the technology being where it is now, is there a different solution? So that is being considered as we speak. And I'm having conversations with the executive director with responsibility for the transformation programme as to how do we make sure planning is prioritised in this process.
Okay, thank you. Bob Filmer, please.
Thank you, Chair. Well, just a couple of issues. Starting on page 89, one of the concerns I've had with this is the late notice that members and parishes have had in terms of this suddenly happening. Now, I understand it's not something that had to go through the process of scrutiny, but I think it would have been very helpful to have given members and the parishes and those who are involved in the system more warning of this. Because if you look at the backlog, in actual fact, in the last 2 years, you can see it's come down 20%. The number of applications coming in is down 20%. If there'd been a sudden spike in applications and therefore we've got to react, this isn't an emergency. This is something that's been a slow build to the position we're in now, and I just wonder why that couldn't have been looked at earlier. In terms of page 92, it talks about how we're going to deal with this and deal with the quick and easy ones. I just wonder if you can explain to me how do we avoid the too difficult to deal with applications? Because some are complicated and they'll just get put on that back burner and sit there. The danger we run with that is potentially we then go applicants going non-determination, which then puts it in front of us having to deal with it through an appeals process. So how does that work? Legal is an issue and always has been in planning. Section 106 is a complete nightmare. We're talking about externalizing this. From previous experience, externalizing doesn't necessarily solve the problem because you've still got to have your internal people monitoring what your external legal people are doing to make sure they're actually doing what we want them to do. So we'd just like some reassurance on that. The officers, and I can understand the delegation, sub-delegation to senior officers, but again, would just like reassurance as to how we make sure that we keep quality and consistency, that different senior officers don't deal with applications in different ways. And again, on the site visits, as others have mentioned, I think we do need to watch that. It was mentioned at one meeting I was at, we could use Google Maps. Well, Google Maps aren't up to date. One of the problems we have, as we've talked about the recruitment and retention, I really welcome what Councillor Rigby said today about, and Mr. Hall, about the sorting out our salaries for recruitment and retention. But we've lost an awful lot of experienced officers. So at that point, to not go for site visits when you've got officers who are not experienced, who don't know the areas that they're dealing with, we need to be very careful that they don't miss the stuff on the ground that needs to be looked at. And I take a slightly different view on the validation checklist. To me, if you've got 85% of applications coming in invalid, we need to look at our validation checklist. We had this same thing happen before at previous planning authorities. We work closely with agents to say, is there stuff in our validation checklist which is a problem? Can we find a way of making this thing work? And I think we have, as an authority, lost that interaction between us and agents and planners. There used to be the agents panels, which were very interactive. People fed into those and we learned from them as much as they learned from us. Sometimes it feels now with the agents panel, it's like a presentation to agents that this is what we're doing and just go away and that's what's happening. Agents are commercial. A lot of them are finding when they're not getting decisions made, their finances are really struggling. Some are going bust. Some are prioritising work outside of Somerset because they can't afford to do applications here because of the timetable it's taking. So I think it is something I very much appreciate the fact we are looking to deal with this, but we do need to look at ourselves as well as looking at other people as to how we can take this forward.
Thank you, Bob. Good points there. Chris, Alison, who's...
I'll start again if you don't mind. So why was it urgent? Well, it becomes urgent at the point at which we can evidence that the actions we have been taking today aren't working and that the situation is getting worse. So at the point at which I could see that, evidence-based via the work that Mondrian have done with all of the detailed analysis they've got, at that point, I can't unknow that. So it became urgent at that point. Could we have done something more in terms of briefings in advance? Well, perhaps, but in order to get to where we got to, we had to brief members, all members. In advance of briefing members, we needed to make sure that the executive were aware and were supportive of the approach. We needed to brief the staff because the staff can't hear about this after the public. We had to pre-warn the developers forum, so they didn't get the detail, but what they got was there's change coming next week. You're going to be made aware of. So there was quite a lead in a very short period of time, or rather a lot of activity in a very short period of time. Could we have done more? Yeah, maybe we could. But on the basis that this was urgent, I took a route that said, I cannot now unknow what I know. The outcome of this is intended to make it all better. So in terms of what does that mean for developers and agents and those who are dependent upon this for their living, if we do nothing, then nothing improves. If we change nothing, this just continues to get worse. So we've tried to be really honest in our storytelling to explain this. The intention here is to make this better for you. We're going to have to do something different for a limited period of time. Externalizing legal, well, so we through the planning team will commission legal. Legal will determine where it goes. They don't have the resources in-house and they are managing the onward transition and appointment of external legal. I fully appreciate that it would be better if they were fully resourced in-house, but that's not the case at the moment. They have their own challenges around recruitment and retention as well. So for us, our period here is to say we want to unblock everything that is possibly standing in our way, and if that's legal resources, then it gets outsourced. We need to progress this stuff. We've heard about the frustrations in Section 106 agreements, etc. already. I can't even read my own handwriting. Oh, so we were tackling those that were quickest, easiest to deal with first, because that buys us the time to deal with the more complex ones. So we're not doing these necessarily in date order. We're doing them in how quickly can we get the backlog down, and we snowball all of that time saved into helping us manage the more complex applications. We were allowing discretion on site visits. I understand that that's a concern for people. There are some things that can be done online. There are some things that can't, and that's why we're adding that discretion into the system. The validation checklist is an interesting one because the fewer things you do up front in validation, those problems still exist. They just get uncovered later. Validation, and I say this in a professional manner, but that is a cheaper resource to us than costly planning and senior planning officers. So if we can identify and solve issues here, that saves a more expensive resource identifying them later on. But we are looking at our processes as well. So this isn't us saying the problem is external. We are saying there is a systemic issue here that we can manage in a certain way.
Thank you. Simon Coles. Simon, I don't. Alison, did you have anything to?
Yeah, I was just going to add on the validation point that we have recently been out to consultation to review our validation checklist, and for the first time we now have an authority-wide validation checklist that was went through consultation, including the Agents Forum. We've had a couple of meetings with them. They have fed into that and should understand what's on that list. What we're trying to do, and many other authorities do this, is to make sure that they come in right first time. We've heard from a lot of agents that they just bung anything in, and they effectively they're using us as their planning consultants. We don't want that to continue. So this is a harsh approach, but it's something that we need to do to make sure that when the applications come in, they come in with all the information that we need in order to facilitate us making a decision effectively and quickly.
Okay, thank you. Simon, you need to leave shortly.
Thank you, Chair. That's very kind. Yeah, just from a planning chair point of view, over 50% of my workload is applicants asking me why their application is invalid. Because they have sent an application in which they haven't done the work on, they haven't read the validation checklist, they've just banged it in, and it's being sent back because they haven't filled the form out properly. And we can talk from anything from just not getting the basic details right through to serious planning errors. But the 85% is terrifying, and it does show, irrespective of whether other individuals don't think it's the case, it does show that a number of planning consultants fire an application in knowing that we will return it to them as invalid, telling them what's wrong and what they need to do to get it right. And that is very time consuming and is causing a huge backlog. We need to get on top of this. We need to support our officers. We need to cut through all of this and get a better system installed. Yes, there have been problems with pay and retention. There always have been problems with pay and retention when the volume house builders pay roughly twice as much of money as local authorities pay. It's always difficult. It always has been. Legally, Section 106 agreements are individual to each application, and they do take some legal time to deal with, and they have always been an issue with any application, the 106 side. I absolutely approve of the let's get the simple stuff done quickly and get the backlog down, because that will create the room and the space for us to get on top of the larger ones. And yes, there's always a risk an applicant will appeal. That's their right. It's always been their right. Some of them will do it. A lot of them realise that there's no point in doing that because it won't get them any further forward. But I support all the work that we're doing. But we need to be conscious that 85% is not our problem. It's mostly caused by people not filling the forms out properly. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I've got Steve Ashton in the room, and then I'll come back to Marcus and Henry, who've asked to come back.
Yeah, I have one suggestion on site visits. Why not utilise parish councils, town councils there, given the checklist for taking photographs and bits and pieces and feeding into the system, devolving a resource there. Also, they have local knowledge, so due diligence of planning applications is very useful from that aspect. And thirdly, it's getting them involved. They feel sort of detached. Quite often they call themselves statutory consultees, but they feel ignored a lot of the time. So actually involving them within the process would help on the PR side of things as well.
Thanks, Steve. Well, the old Taunton Dean did, of course, have a delegated planning agreement with certain parishes, which I was part of in Milverton, which, as far as I was concerned, worked very successfully. I would, as parish clerk, I would put up site notices. We would arrange site visits with everything. And we would have a thorough, informed debate at the parish council meeting. I think the downside from Taunton Dean's point of view was that because the parish council was operating as a subcommittee of the planning committee, effectively, it needed to have a planning officer present. That was as far as I could see, that was the only downside, because the planning report would still have to be written. And there was an element of jeopardy, of course, if the parish council went against the planning officer's recommendation, because they would have to cover the costs of any appeal. I know Milverton is still very keen for this to be reinstated. I understand the authority, this particular council has very little appetite for that, but I think you're absolutely right. Involving parishes in some of this work to help alleviate the pressure, I think would not be a bad thing to explore. So thanks for that. Simon.
If I might just come back on that very point, one of the issues that I've found consistently coming through is when we receive comments from statutory consultees, they don't use planning reasons as their objection. They will say, we object to this planning application because, and it isn't a planning reason. So when the officers go back and say, thank you for your comments, we understand you don't like it, but I don't like it is not a planning reason. And consistently then that, so I think we can do a lot more work with parishes, and I would welcome that, because like you, Gwyl, I was involved in that scheme with local parishes, and it worked very well. And so I would be fairly keen to see that reintroduced, because it did work well and it did involve local parishes. However, it's this question of using valid planning reasons with our statutory consultees, and it's not meant as a detriment to any parish councillor anywhere. But yes, it is also time consuming and resource consuming from our point of view as an authority, because we have to have a planning officer at that parish meeting. So I understand the constraints that Alison and Chris have with it, but I thought the system worked quite well in the 12 years that we were running it.
Well, it was set up in the mid-90s, I think, from memory. I mean, and the parishes would pay for planning officer attendance. And I say it that all the responses I drafted contained valid planning reasons for the council's opinion.
Didn't suggest every parish councillor never used a phrase like "I don't like it." I wasn't suggesting there was no knowledge. I was suggesting that quite often the planning reasons, the reasons put forward for an objection or potential refusal, were not actually planning reasons.
Well, I think this actually is quite an important point, because if you can, dare I say, educate parishes to be more engaged in the process and more collaborative, then I think that can only be a good thing. So thanks.
That was my point, albeit badly put. Thank you, Gwyl.
Thank you, Simon.
Thank you for your time.
Susanna.
I was probably just like to reiterate what Steve said. I think that was a really good idea, and I'd already had it written down that, you could include councillors on site visits, because I think we do know what is in our local area, and if you tell us, can you check this, can you check that, we can do it. At least, if nothing else, it improves the perception that Tom was talking about before of outside looking in. It looks like we are doing our due diligence and not just looking on Google Maps. That's just not good enough. I'm really pleased to hear about the work in terms of finances and pay levels in an attempt to try and bring down agency staff, because the cost of agency staff, well, I only know what I've been told by someone who does it as a job and goes around working as an agency. You know, he says he earns 3 to 4 times as much as he would earn. So us paying them more but relying less on agency staff is a no-brainer. So it's really good to hear that that's been kind of gone through a formal process and now seems to be in place. I did ask at the briefing when we were told about this, whether we could have a cast iron guarantee that it was a temporary way of working and that this wasn't just a kind of trial run. Now, given what Mike Rigby said, it sounds like he maybe knows more than the rest of us. So if some of these changes are possibly going to remain, it would be nice to know which they are, and I really hope it's not going to be around limiting communication, because it just makes it harder for everyone except the people sat in the office who don't want to pick up the phone. Now, you know, I know it might be time consuming, but actually we do have a responsibility to communicate with the public and with councillors who represent the public. That has to be possible. And I'm not happy about this 14 days business. I think it's fine for people who are paying somebody to help them with their planning application. But when you're just talking about an individual that's looking to do some not massive alteration to their home, if we're not able to support them and to limit to 14 days, it's quite a short period of time. The average person, if they're not using a planning consultant, will have to go to builders or other professionals to get some of these answers, and 14 days isn't that long. So, you know, maybe it could be 28 days. I don't know. It just seems harsh, because if it's someone who really needs to do that work, they'll have to pay the fee again and apply again. And it seems harsh when it's not. I appreciate what Simon Coles was saying before about almost our officers being used to do the job that planning officers, independent planning officers, are being paid to do. That's obviously not okay, planning consultants. But if it's individuals trying to just work through processes to get things done to their property, it just seems a bit harsh. But I think this has been really helpful, definitely for me, to just have a bit more background. And also it did just feel like a shock when we were told, and I know you've given the reasons for why it happened and the time frame that it did, but for us who go to planning meetings every month and feel that we should be part of things, it felt like a shock. So I guess that wasn't ideal.
Thank you. I think my understanding is if you put an application in and it's, you don't have to pay twice, do you? Or is that discretionary on the council? Alison?
Yes, if an application is deemed not to be valid and it's returned, then the fee is also returned at the same time. So you would have to go through the process again, but you would have had your fee returned in the meantime. We also do offer a pre-application service, which will also include advice as to what is required to make an application valid. So that is open to anyone to utilise should they do so. And one of the things we will be thinking about this is whether or not there's a validation check we can provide as a quick and simple service, a fee paid service, and that is something that we would be looking to introduce at the end of this period. In terms of the question about what changes will be retained, we don't know that until we've done the evaluation, until we've seen what impact the changes that we're putting in place temporarily have had. So no decision has been made on those.
Okay, thank you, Alison. Simon, before you go, did you want to very quickly?
Just before I go, I have a medical appointment, so I'm afraid I have to go off for that. I would remind councillors that you are sent the application in your division for you to comment on as the divisional member, and of course you can make those referrals, and you can ask for applications in particular to come with planning reasons. To go to the committee rather than be a delegated decision. So that opportunity for engagement from the local member with their communities and with the council is there. And I would, I always read the comments that come back to me from my fellow divisional members around my, in my case, the West area. Okay, my apologies, but I don't want to be late.
All right,
Thank you very much.
Thank you for comments. Right, I've got no members who haven't spoken yet, so I will go back to those who've asked to speak again, which is Henry Hobhouse and then Marcus Cravis.
I just wanted to make the point, Mr. Chairman, that we are paying our planning officers less than both Devon and Dorset. And if you expect to employ people, you've got to pay the going rate or above the going rate.
Thank you. Marcus?
Actually, that's similar to my question. My question was, and portfolio hold mentioned about, we've mentioned about recruitment payments, I suppose. How does are we now actually paying the same level as, say, Dorset and Devon, or are we still actually paying less? But then, of course, I just want to say it's not necessarily all about money. Working environment, working, etc., etc. Does, not everybody's a mercenary and just goes to the highest bidder. Some people, if they enjoy where they work, and that retention, is there anything else we can do in retention, on retention? Because are they leaving for other authorities? Are they leaving for private sector, etc.? I assume we've got those stats anyway. But what is also, I won't comment on parish councils because I'm here as a member of the committee, as a councillor, not as a member of the public. So I'll leave it when I'm a member of the public. But I think that's a meeting in itself. Although I do think planning training should be almost compulsory for parish councils. It's amazing how many parish councils have never had any planning training. And I don't like this, is often said. The thing I was going to ask, though, and bring up to this, bearing in mind we're in this position here, we got 5 local plans in Somerset, if you don't include Exmoor National Park. Obviously we're meant to be putting new local plans together. Now, regardless of any views on whether the local plan system is actually working or not working, etc., and that's again another meeting. If we've got to be putting a new local plan together for Somerset, is the situation with our planning department delaying that? And actually, are we statutorily obliged to have it done by a certain time, a bit like we were with other policies, or can we drag it out a bit? And if we're having this problems with actually dealing with the day-to-day applications, how's the local plan stuff going? Or are we just, as we said earlier, outsourcing that? But the other question was, if we talk about outsourcing legal work, have we got space in the finances for that outsourcing? Because obviously, I assume it'd be more expensive if it was done than if it was done in-house.
Thanks. I think one of the key drivers for this is that, as you mentioned, the pressure that staff are under. So they may not be paid enough, but the pressure at work is a key component here. Alison, do you want to cover any of those points?
Sorry, my system froze for a moment, so I'm not sure I caught all of those. But so could someone just repeat what they were?
Sorry, Marcus, do you want to
just
I think the point about whether these changes are going to impact on the creation of the local plan.
Oh, the local plan. So we took a report to the February meeting of the Planning and Transport Policy Exec Subcommittee, which set out in the local development scheme, which is essentially the project plan that we're required to publish regularly, the timetable for producing the local plan. We're currently at the evidence gathering stage. There will be a further update report on the progress of the local plan going to the October meeting. In the meantime, quite a lot of the evidence has started to be published, and I know there were briefings sent out to all members recently on the employment needs work that's been done and the landscape evidence work that has been done. One of the proposals going to the meeting next week of the Planning and Transport Policy is to set up a steering group for the local plan of members. So subject to that being agreed, that member group will be overseeing the production of the local plan. We will also be preparing workshops and other briefings for all members because we recognise it's an important issue. In terms of the statutory requirement, yes, we are under the structural change order required to have it by 2028. We are currently a bit behind that. However, we are waiting for new regulations in terms of plan making to come into play. So although we're progressing on the basis of the current regulations, we're expecting there to be changes. And so the timetable will also be impacted about that. But we are moving as quickly as we can. We intend to go out to Regulation 18 consultation, which is with a full draft plan next year. Once we have a full draft plan, which will include proposed site allocations, that will carry some weight in decision making and will put us in a much better place in terms of our development management decisions.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, in the absence of any, I've got one brief question to ask. In terms of the SIM, the sort of what do you call it, the short interval management, and I'm not. I may have misunderstood how it's supposed to work, but I think my understanding was that you would deal with new stuff coming in as a priority, and then and hope to get back to the stuff that's been hanging around a while later, and that was going to have a significant impact. Now, that sounds counterintuitive to me, which makes me wonder if I've misunderstood what you're trying to do and how you're trying to do it. So, and I dare say it's also a question that's kind of turned up to a couple of parish councils as well. So, a little bit of background on how that's all supposed to work and reduce the backlog would be welcome, certainly from the chair's point of view.
Yeah, by all means. See, Alison's frozen, so I'll pick this up. So the principle of short interval management is to deal with the things that can be dealt with most quickly first. So that doesn't mean starting at the oldest or at the newest. It means triaging everything in the list and saying, well, what could we get off the list the fastest, so that we create capacity? I've probably caused a bit of confusion. I think in the member briefing I talked about, it does feel a bit counterintuitive that sometimes that will mean it'll be the application that was received yesterday that is correct, ready, able, within delegations, can be decided. That might be the quickest thing on the list, and someone who's been waiting for 6 weeks might be lower down the list because it's more complicated, requires more engagement, resource, statutory consultees. So it doesn't always feel like the logical thing, but for the purpose of delivering change quickly, that is the principle. You get everything off the books that you can legitimately do as fast as you can and divert those resources into the more complex cases.
And you channel and control the communications in relation to all of it, so you can pick it out and deal with that later. Yes, yes, that clarifies it for me. Right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time and trouble on this. I think we've given it a good working over. I hope we're all clearer now than we were when we came in, and I think we've given colleagues online an opportunity to listen in and see how this very important piece of work is going to work. Henry.
Mr. Chairman, could we put through a recommendation, please, at the end of this 12 weeks, this scheme is brought back to the Climate and Place Scrutiny Committee so that we can actually see how effective it has been and what the results are and whether or not it therefore needs to be continued or re-scrutinied?
Yeah, I mentioned that in my discussion with Mike Rigby, of course. Yes, more than happy to make that as a recommendation. Are you prepared to propose it? I'm happy to second it. Is everybody in favour of that this goes to scrutiny? And I think it's either before the end of the 12-week period when it's being evaluated, or as soon as possible afterwards. Okay, is that everybody happy that that's a recommendation from this committee? Okay, well, as I say, thank you all for your debate. We now welcome Nicola Dawson. Nicola, thank you for your patience. We're running a little behind time, but you're going to tell us about community resilience and give us an update on what we all should be doing and buying in tins of beans and things like that.
Tins of beans are a very good start, thank you. I'll just share my screen. I've got some slides. Just a moment.
Can you move closer to the mic, please, Nicola?
Of course, is that better? Okay, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to this committee. I did circulate a members' info sheet last month sometime about a couple of aspects of this, but it's brilliant to have the opportunity just to give you a flavour of some of the work that's going on to help encourage our communities to become more resilient. I've got three main things to cover off: the legislative background, why we're doing it and under what powers, then an overview of current activities, successes and challenges, and then a forward look, because we've recently had some government guidance which does slightly change what we've been doing. Some of you will be familiar with the background to all of this, Civil Contingencies Act 2004, which is the basis under which we undertake emergency planning and preparedness, and a couple of other documents. The previous government's resilience framework laid out some really useful steers to us around promotion of whole society resilience, better understanding of risk. And on the subject of risk, there's some available documentation online, the UK's National Risk Assessment and a more local Avon and Somerset risk assessment. Just looking at the Civil Contingencies Act again for a moment or two, just to explain why we do community resilience as part of emergency planning. And a couple of points I wanted to make. The Civil Contingencies Act, as I think many of you probably know, applies to unitary councils, district and county councils, but not to town and parish councils. So the Category 1 responders, the upper tier authorities, have got the responsibilities outlined there, including about warning and informing and advising the public. And that could be ahead of emergencies. It's a good idea to have a store cupboard with water, tins of beans, alternative sources of heating, etc., as well as the communication during an emergency. The town and parish councils don't have those duties, but the government does encourage them to think about how they could support their citizens and maintain their own services during incidents. And there's a little bit more, you may say, what exactly is community resilience? That's the Cabinet Office working definition. And it puts a lot of emphasis on communities and residents being aware of the risks and thinking about what they can do at the most basic level to support their households and neighbours and wider communities. And we do have a Somerset Council strategy on community resilience, quite a short document. It's available on our Somerset Council intranet. And it could be made publicly available, and it just describes how we go about encouraging and supporting communities to be more resilient. And a lot of communities have seized it with great enthusiasm, and the picture in the corner is the Three Villages flood group, which is Mudford, Chiltern Canterloo and Ashington, who've come together to plan and prepare for flooding and have a very good setup locally. So that's the sort of background why we do it. Here's a bit more detail about what we do and how we do it. The basis of our activities is the Somerset Prepared Partnership, which is actually run by my team. Currently, I have 5 emergency planners. We're just recruiting to get up to full complement of 6. And Somerset Prepared is the way we work together with the Environment Agency, police, fire, ambulance and lovely voluntary sector partners like the marvellous people across at the Community Council for Somerset, now called Thrive. Yes. And it came about because we found we were talking with town and parish councils about getting ready for flooding, and then next week the Environment Agency were there, and next month the fire service. So it's a way of coordinating and promoting the same messages and running projects together. So we do work very closely with those agencies I've just mentioned, but I particularly wanted to mention the very, very collaborative work carried out with the Somerset Rivers Authority funded community engagement officers, and there they are, Belle and Paul, who are delivering a lot of very focused work around flood prevention, protection and preparedness. And I also need to shout out to the local community network link officers and staff who've been very, very helpful in enabling us to speak to groups of parish and town councils and deliver things like our how to write an emergency plan workshop and our riparian responsibility workshop. And we've noticed that through the LCNs, a number of parishes are getting together and sharing information and advice on developing community plans. I think there's some really good work done with Milverton, Oak and Wiveliscombe, learning from each other and sharing. This, I'm not going to read all the way through this, but you can see the list of activities and resources that we have planned. Most of these are accessible through the Somerset Prepared website. Plan templates, exercises, workshops. I particularly wanted to point out the value that we found in bringing together communities, community representatives, keen advocates for resilience at our annual Community Resilience Days. There's a picture of Flood Mary, that's what she calls herself, Mary Dono Long, advocate for flood protection at household level. She has been flooded herself more times than she cares to remember, and she came along to the event last year and shared a lot of really helpful information to people about how to flood proof or make their homes more flood resilient. This year's event will be taking place at Somerset Racecourse on the 15th of October. We're aiming for 200 delegates. Last year we had 150. We've already had 97 people booked up, and 2/3 of those, I think, are community representatives. So we're looking forward to this year's event. A couple of other things we promote to town and parish councils and communities: signing up to a community places of safety scheme, so that the community think ahead in advance where they would use if people had to be evacuated from their community. It's usually the village hall, the church hall. We try and steer people away from schools because that can be disruptive. And it's all we're asking is a building that's warm, safe, comfortable, where the community can look after themselves and be a focus point for the blue lights and Somerset Council responders as necessary. And at this point, I have to do a shout out to the residents of Wedden Cross, who are particularly the publican who opened their doors to support the people caught up in that awful coach crash several weeks ago. That was just an outstanding example of a community rallying round people in need. The other similar scheme that we promote is to encourage parish and town councils to sign up to our emergency community contact scheme. We can always, of course, contact town and parish councils through the clerks, but we suggest that there's value too in them identifying a few people within the community who can act as a point of contact and liaison point between the council and Somerset Council and the blue lights and local residents. And the final scheme I wanted to mention is the Somerset Prepared Grants. We encourage communities to prepare an emergency plan, and those who've done so can apply for grants of up to £5,000 to buy whatever kit they think is relevant to supporting their community in an emergency, with a couple of small exceptions. Generally, it's around resilience equipment, sheds, high-vis, torches, welly boots, really practical stuff. And just a quick view about how many communities have taken advantage of that scheme, and they can come back time and again. It's a scheme there to be used, and we're grateful to the Somerset Rivers Authority for providing some funding towards that. Shifting the final section, final few things I wanted to mention was a forward look, and there's three elements to this. One is about the government's recent resilience action plan. Another is a few thoughts about closer working with other parts of Somerset Council, and the other one is around widening our engagement. I mentioned at the start of the presentation about the previous government's resilience strategy, which talked about being aware of risks and promoting whole societal resilience. That was very much in line with the Civil Contingencies Act, the focus on multiple risks and hazards, very much focusing on bad weather and natural hazards and that sort of thing. The Resilience Action Plan was launched last month. It's part of a series of government updates you may be aware of, the Defence Review, Security Strategy and that sort of thing. I'm noticing that it marks a bit of a shift in tone from government's previous pronouncements on resilience. It's recognising very much the more uncertain international situation. It's being more explicit about the need for individuals, residents, communities to be more prepared so that they're ready to respond to disruptive challenges, whatever they may be. And it talks about enhancing resilience across the whole of society. I've asked some questions of MHCLG about whether they mean us to go more towards the sort of civil defence level of preparedness or whether to continue as we are. I have not had any guidance yet about that. So I just wanted to flag to you that the documents like the Resilience Action Plan does talk more about people being more prepared, but what that actually means in terms of how we're talking with communities, I'm waiting on guidance. So I'll mention that again at the end. I'm looking for opportunities to work with other colleagues within Somerset Council, particularly tapping into the excellent work that's being done through the climate change and adaptation work, because I think there's some challenges here and some possibilities to put protective measures in place further upstream, as it will. The more trees you plant, the less likely there is to flood, so the less likely you are to evacuate people during flooding times, all that sort of thing. So that's some current activities going on. And finally, we're conscious we get quite a good engagement with communities and town and parish councils, but it does tend to be a lot of more settled, older, retired members of the community have got time to think about this. We really want to start trying to get into the young families, the people on low incomes and that sort of thing. And I've been talking with the public health team about some of the excellent work they're doing to promote food resilience. So to that end, we've launched a baseline preparedness survey for town, city and parish councils, just to get the parish councils to tell us how prepared they think they are and what they worry about and what they'd be prepared to do, so that we can then do some more targeted work. And I particularly want to explore some more work with town councils. A number have come to me already and we're in conversation, but recognising that our current parish emergency planning model is predicated on the smaller communities like Oak, who are superb, and we need a different model and approach for Minehead, Yeovil, Chard, Bridgewater, Taunton and that sort of thing. So again, we're working very closely with the LCN and other colleagues. So that's a really quick overview. And just to sum up, steady work going on, continuing work that's been in place for a number of years. We really want to widen the engagement opportunities, and that'll be informed by the preparedness survey. But I wanted to give you a heads up that there might be some change in tone and emphasis and requests from government as a result of the new Resilience Action Plan. That's everything, Chair, that I wanted to cover. I'm really happy to take questions or to talk to people offline if anybody wants to talk about more local issues.
Thank you, Nicola. That's very interesting. A quick run through of it. Martin Lovell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just something, resilience grants, how are these being communicated, from whom and to whom? Because obviously, if we have a role in that, then give us a role, but I'm not terribly clear how that's happening. Thank you.
I can't remember. I mean, I remember we applied for one in Milverton, so we got a generator for the village hall in terms of power cut, but I can't remember what the application process is, Nicola.
It's a very straightforward application process. We perhaps could be more explicit with our marketing. Application forms available on the Somerset Prepared website. The grant panel meets 4 times a year, and it's a 2-page application form. We do ask for a small contribution, 20% from the applicant.
Okay, thank you. Marcus, did I see your hand or?
Thank you, Nicola. Yeah, I mean, this is really, really good stuff. I mean, it's interesting, actually. I mean, one thing parish councils, a lot of my parish councils do really well is this stuff. And I think that's been, yeah, I don't want to name them. I know I go to many and they're up on it. I think with a small parish council, small village, and I'll take an example of Withycombe when they had the flash floods, you know, it all worked and it all, you know, they've got a nice village hall and everything was all worked very well. And again, with some of the smaller villages, that are more prone to flooding, they got the systems in place and the parish councils, you know who to call and who does what and everything else. And as was rightly said, that, you know, they tend to be more retired people, have a little bit more time on their hands, but then active minds, active body and all that. So that's good. But my concern, it's interesting, you then touched on the bigger stuff, because actually, I mean, back in '96, I stood there and watched the sea come in. Yeah, not much I could do to stop it. It made its mind up, it was coming. But it's then how the bigger towns cope, because maybe, and I'll be very careful because there's a sense of community in all towns, but then how do the bigger towns work and other town councils stepping up to the mark in this? And I just wondered how that's working. And then how do we cope with what you said was, you know, the international situation, etc. And, you know, I mean, I'm very conscious that, you know, I think with the recent tsunami alerts that never happened, that it was quite interesting. The newsfeed popped up everything about that nuclear, is it Fukushima in, I can't pronounce it, in Japan. And I'm very conscious that, you know, I can see a nuclear power station from where I live. And what happened, you know, I've never been important enough in any council to know what contingency plans are in place for that. But how would that work out? And are there actually, you know, how prepared are the villages for, say, the unthinkable happening?
Nicola, do you want to?
Yeah, I'll do this in reverse order. The emergency plans, if you go onto the Somerset Council intranet site and click on the emergency planning intranet page, you can access all of our current plans. Some of them are a little bit redacted because of contact names, but you can go and see it in the Hinckley plan and evacuation plans. So they're all there to look at, and I'm really happy to talk to anyone about the detail. Town councils, and you're absolutely right, there's more work to be done with the bigger communities, and I think I mentioned we've had some contact already with some of the town councils, but I need to follow them round, and I've missed what the third point was. Oh no, so I've got it. Alerts. You mentioned tsunami alerts. Just to flag up that there's another test of the national alerting system in September. Do you remember last year? It was activated for the storm and it caught a lot of people out, which comes to my final point, which is about making people aware of what's expected of them. A couple of years ago, we tried to do some social media work saying it's a good idea to have a grab bag and, and a few tins of beans in your cupboard and a grab bag by the door. And we actually got some complaints for being alarmist. Whereas in Sweden, they expect people to have 10 days worth of food and drink and to turn out to protect military sites, so that there's a real mismatch between the way the UK manages its expectation conversation with the public and the way other countries do.
Yeah, well, it's not just Sweden. I mean, my daughter lives in Switzerland, and they have emergency rooms as well as a matter of course. So I think but I mean, in a way, this is illustrative of our community mindset, I suppose, in a way. And you made the point that emergency plans or emergency planning tends to be dominated by the more mature and retired people and engaging younger people. But this isn't just a question of emergency planning. This is a question about volunteering and general community engagement across the board, because people, particularly those with families, have far less time and far more responsibilities, and it appears to me are under a lot more pressure than we were when my family was growing up. How we crack that, I don't know. So I'd be very interested to hear some ideas, as particularly, as you say, from the emergency planning, because that could affect anybody anywhere. And we had serious floods in Milverton not that long ago. Our emergency plan before that was based on a long-standing 2 or 3 day power cut, which we'd experienced. And it's dealing with that. One of the points I picked up was in terms of not in your presentation, but I think I've seen it somewhere, was about getting in touch with the elderly and vulnerable. Now this was a particularly difficult problem for our emergency plan, because there's confidentiality involved, and so therefore you couldn't go to social services, for example, and say, well, who's receiving care in this particular area and do they need support, because they wouldn't tell you. So in the end, we had to rely pretty much on the vicar to know who the people in the village were who were potentially in need of more support than others in an emergency. But I saw in the presentation that this is part of the emergency planning. I just wondered how you sort of crack the confidentiality bit.
That's always a big challenge, isn't it? Working out who's vulnerable during an incident, because vulnerability, as we know, changes with the circumstance. You might be managing perfectly well, but your partner may be away and you have 2 small children to look after. So there's a couple of tools in our tool chest. From an emergency response perspective, we have the utility companies who maintain their priority user registers, so should be looking after the immediate needs of people on their lists. In a big emergency, a big situation, we'd obviously link into children's and adult social care to get their lists, plus the health colleagues. That doesn't really help you in terms of local community planning, but a very good example is Kingston St Mary, and the case study is on the Somerset Prepared website. I think they developed some processes during COVID where they have, I can't remember what they call them, but they're basically coordinators for each area of the village, and they get to know who might need a little bit of extra help. So it's a bit like you mentioned about the vicar. The Kingston St Mary, as I say, the case studies on the Somerset Prepared page, that is one good way of doing it, but that does rely on a reasonable number of motivated volunteers.
Okay, thank you. Tom Power, please.
Thank you. I represent quite a very rural division in one of my villages, Shepton Montague. They came together as a parish, and they've sort of done like a buddy system. But one of the parishioners, I think it was the chair, has designed this map, and he's got these gauges that go on the river. So when it hits to a certain point, they have an hour's alert before it gets to a flood line. and then the whole parish is alerted. I think they've got a WhatsApp group as well, but they've all got their body systems, so they know. And the best thing about it, that their location to meet is actually at the pub, so they quite enjoy it. But yeah, so I don't know if other parishes do the same thing. I think Henry, you mentioned a while ago as well, I think a gauge with the rivers as well. So I think it might just be our area that might just do it, but I don't know if other areas in Somerset do it as well.
Yeah, we got a problem in Ninehead in that the road across floods very regularly and parts of the village flood as well. And the nearest gauge station, telemetry station, is 4 miles upstream, and it doesn't work very well. So in terms of providing an alert, so the parish council there are actively pursuing the Somerset Rivers Authority and with the Environment Agency getting a station nearer downstream, which is more responsive so that it can be linked into the alerts. But Henry, I think you had something on that.
Mr. Chairman, I could probably go on for 3/4 of an hour on this subject, but I'm not going to do it.
Oh, please.
There is now an app which picks up. I raised the money to do Somerset, and actually I've done the whole country. There is almost not a single town or village which doesn't have a measuring device sufficiently close that you can set your own limits, because regardless of the very good work that Nicola's doing, it is every individual's responsibility to guard their own house. I did a presentation on that app at Climate and Place. I'm very happy if there are any individuals who want more, or they can go back and bring up what was said at Climate and Place. The actual cost of the measuring devices that can be got through the Rivers Authority is between £1,200 and £1,400 for each one, and you then have a running cost of, and I may have the figure wrong, I think it's £250 a year to get it to go into the cloud. But actually, if you look on the app, which is where all the devices already are, you will pick up something. And just remember that an upstream measuring device is the most useful, but a downstream measuring device is equally useful if you set your warning set up at quite a low level. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Is it possible to circulate the details of the app, where it can be found, or
100%. I have the presentation, and so does Jamie. And if people want it, they can send me an email or send Jamie an email, and you've got it.
Brilliant. Thank you. Right, it is now just after 1 o'clock, so we've gone over by half an hour, but I think we've covered some fairly meaty topics. So thank everybody for your contributions. In respect of the resilience plan, Nicola, thank you for your presentation. I think you've given us an awful lot of food for thought, and it's no doubt something that we will return to in future. One thing I'm particularly interested in is the take-up of emergency plans across the county, because we seem to face quite a variety of different hazards and challenges in different areas, from remoteness to wet areas to coastal problems. So it would be quite useful to keep an eye on that. And
point out something that I've just pointed out to Marcus, that in 1607, the whole of the Somerset levels and Gloucester and most of the Bristol Channel was I can't get the word out, was absolutely hammered by a Sue's army that came out of Portugal and killed 2,000 people. And it's just about due to happen again. As long as it doesn't.
Yes, buy a house on the hill. Right, before I go, I just want to thank Nicola and her team for all the emergency responses. It's been certainly in terms of the Wedden Cross event a few weeks, the tragic event of several weeks ago. It's very heartening to know that we have a fully responsive team available to us and backing up all our community. So thank you for that. I think, ladies and gentlemen, that shortly after 1 o'clock is time for us to pack up the tent and go home until the next time. So thank you all for your kind time and consideration. And I look forward to seeing you either on screen or in a meeting room in the not too distant future. Thank you.